What's happening? Here we are, another episode. It's happening. Thanks a lot for all of you that subscribed in the meantime, since we had like a Kim Neckerman on our last episode. And as you can see from my today's guest, I like to mix up things. We had a psychobilly guy last week, and today we have a bluegrass guy, and not just any bluegrass guy. We have absolutely one of the best, one of the most legendary bluegrass bass players that I have like huge respect for. So I'm really happy that my guest agreed to be my guest at a Slapstream today. And before I introduce him, I would like to ask you if you can hear me fine. And hello, John from Milwaukee. Hello, Carolyn. And so that's kind of the essential thing for me to know that I should start the show. If you can hear me, I would love to get some thumbs up. So before I introduce my guest, as you probably read, my guest is MIKE BUB from Nashville. He's originally, I believe, from California, but I'm going to ask him all of that. And he had like great career. All right. Thank you, John. Hi from Austin, Texas. I'm glad. Sounds good. Thank you, Marshall Wilburn, the star of our third episode, I believe. Another amazing bluegrass bass player. And thank you, Jack, loud and clear. All right, so I can introduce my guest. Without further ado, I would like to introduce you, MIKE BUB. Welcome.
Here I am.
Yeah, I'm glad you are. How are you? How have you been?
I've been good. I've actually been working a little bit, which is nice. Things kind of picking up a little bit here and there. Been doing some sessions and little things here and there. So
I'm glad to hear that. So during the pandemic, were you able to stay busy kind of, or?
Well, not through the big main part of the shutdown, which was the first couple months. But after about 4th of July, things kind of started to change studio-wise. I made a record with this guy named Sturgill Simpson in June, and I think we cut 22 songs for a bluegrass record with him, and that's the first thing that I really did during all this.
And after that,
here lately, I've just been
some studio work after that.
Yeah, a few little things here and there. Now it seems like everybody's getting busy in the studio. It's going to be a free-for-all in 2021 with new records and people vying for these jobs, what little jobs there will be as it rolls back open, I guess, you know.
Well, we definitely hope for all of that. We got quite a few comments right now from your friends, your fans. We got from Gary, hi from Tennessee. Have hello, Bob from Town Mountain.
Yeah.
And what is the question? You have like a first question. What do I mean during the pandemic? It's still going down.
Don't pay attention to those guys.
All right. I have to, they're,
Those are my buddies from up in Asheville. They have a great bluegrass band called Town Mountain. And
awesome.
Produced a couple records on them. They're my good pals.
You mentioned that record that you've been working on. Like, so are there any slapping?
There's a little bit on there here and there where they wanted some more traditional sound on some of that stuff. Sturgill kind of wanted that. Just a few little things here and there.
I love asking like these kind of questions, especially to bluegrass bass players. We're gonna get into that a little bit later. First thing that I wanted to ask you: how did you get when you started? What was the initial thing that drew you like to upright bass and slap bass in particular?
Well, when I first started, I played bluegrass banjo, and that was my first passion and love. And a guy that I took lessons from was in a part-time bluegrass band, and they had a guy that couldn't make a gig, so he said, "Hey, here's a bass and here's a tape of 10 songs. Go learn these." And so I basically taught myself how to play those 10 songs and played that very first job. I was probably 15 or 16 years old. And so from there, I would just pick it up every once in a while, but I didn't really play much. I was really a banjo player, bluegrass-style banjo player. And then later on, I formed a band where I started taking the bass a little more seriously. And that was with a guy named Ron Block, who plays with Alison Krauss now. And he's just a phenomenal instrumentalist, banjo and guitar player. So I just handed that over to him, and I played the bass in that band. But that's how I really got serious about it. And when I was growing up, you run across guys amateur musicians that play in all kinds of different styles. Some guys play with their thumb, where they have these sort of quirky slap styles and stuff. And so some of the earliest people I saw, I just kind of saw them play these different little things, and I just kind of figured it out on my own, just how to incorporate some of it. But later on, when I saw Jerry McCoury play for the first time, I had never seen anybody play like him. And he basically played, his hand just went up and down like this, and he would go from a slap to a snap to a pull of the string. And it was all just very almost rockabilly oriented. And the timing of the Del McCoury band and that sort of thing is very unique like that. And it fits and it works. And so when I went to work for Del McCoury, I couldn't copy Jerry because I couldn't play anything like him. He's very original and a unique player. But I tried to incorporate some of the things that he was doing into my playing so that I would keep sort of the essence of the McCoury sound in there. And so I kind of developed it through that. I never really got too deep into it. I mean, I've never really been an official rockabilly player where you just play like that all the time. But he showed me a few things. And then I ran across that video called The Ungentle Art of Slap Bass by Kevin Smith. And I just, I learned a couple of techniques off of that and just used some of those and kind of developed it on my own from there.
It's funny you're mentioning that that video, because the reason why I heard about you for the first time, it was from Mark Rubin.
Yeah.
And that was probably...
Yeah, and Mark's on that video too, isn't he? That's right.
Yeah.
I mentioned Mark.
It's their mutual effort. And I would say the first kind of like serious, I wouldn't say the first one, because the first one was actually Milt Hinton, which was pretty serious slap bass instructional.
I got to see him play actually when I was a teenager.
Oh, did you?
And of course I didn't know anything. I didn't know what I was seeing, but I did see him play, and he was incredible. And I remember it. And I bought a couple of his records after I learned who he was and that sort of thing. But yeah, he's great.
That's awesome. Have you seen that video that I'm talking about?
Which one? Of Milt Hinton?
Milt Hinton's instructional slap bass video.
Never seen it. No.
It came out, I believe, in '93, so a couple of years before Mark's and Kevin's. Okay. And somebody actually recently uploaded the whole thing on YouTube.
Oh, really?
So you can check it out.
I'll have to look at that. That's awesome.
Yeah, it's one of those like Ray Brown presents up double bass or something like that series. And there was who else was on it? I remember there was Francois Rabat, Milt Hinton, and John Clayton, maybe. I think that, those three guys, but, Ray Brown do a little introduction, and then it's a pretty cool thing. I like it. Art of Playing Bass, I believe it's called.
Okay. I'll look that up. That's awesome.
Yeah. The whole thing is on YouTube, like everything else now.
Right.
Which is good and bad, I guess. So you got interested for slap bass because of Jerry? Was he one of the main reasons, or?
Well, I think so, more than anybody, because I was trying to use some of that stuff in that sound. That's the very first time I saw Del McCoury play. Jerry was playing with him, and like I say, I'd never seen anybody play like that before. It was just, it was otherworldly to me. I was just like, man, this guy is just amazing. Especially incorporating slap into waltz time. And he would do triple slaps in waltz time. It would just blow my mind. But I never really got a good hang of that. But yeah, I really tried to borrow from that when I got in Del's band. I was pretty much a pretty straightforward bass player until I got in that band, and then I just kind of started borrowing and using different things to sort of keep that sound in its main element.
I love hearing slap bass with bluegrass music, and it's kind of interesting because lots of people are really against it or have like a very strong opinion about it. When I moved to the States, 16 years ago. I moved to San Francisco, and bluegrass scene is really strong over there.
Mm-hmm.
And I was so excited. Just I wanted to slap all the time. And it's like, oh no, 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 you can't do that. I was like, okay. They respect it because I always had like good technique, but it's like, no, no, no. Here, you don't do that. Here, maybe you can do it for a solo or this.
Yeah,
or
it
that.
has to be. You have to be kind of go in and out. I weave it in and out, so I use it as a lift, like into a strong banjo solo. You would slap into that thing, or coming out of something, or an ending, or something like that. And I would just kind of weave it in and out. And you can't do it all the time because
absolutely, yeah.
You know,
I mean,
especially for a singer, you know, when you're backing a singer, that's really the focus of what you're trying to back up. And so you stay out of the way of that and don't want to compete with that.
Are you okay over there?
Uh-oh. Just did a flip.
It's not an earthquake. We had an earthquake yesterday. You know, some friends of mine, they were doing live stream, like all of their iPads, like, oh, that's crazy.
My hands.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. You know what I noticed, like if I play like with a mandolin, I kind of like playing a little bit more walking pizzicato lines, and then if I play with the banjo, I love having that kind of like a flat and Scruggs groove, you know, when you actually slap, but kind of simple.
Yeah.
And then you do a solo, and then you can kind of show off a little bit.
Yeah. Well, you know, the ultimate really is if you look at those Flat and Scruggs videos of Jake Tulloch playing. He was able to just weave it in and out, and those are the kind of guys like Jerry McCoury grew up listening to. Was people like George Shuffler and Jake Tulloch, and they just combined all these different techniques. And some of it's just a snap. You know, people call it a slap, but really it's a snap of the string. It's just like a real direct snap of it. And
we're going to talk about it later. I have that.
And also,
I have a couple of questions.
If you listen to a lot of early Bill Monroe music, it's all swinging music from the 40s. The bass is walking all over the place, you know, and propelling the music. And, of course, that's a product of what was on the radio at the time, I think. You know, when you think about the swing era of the 30s and 40s, all that stuff kind of crept into Bill Monroe's music. And a lot of his early bass players weren't very good as far as kind of knowing what they were playing. There's a lot of mistakes on those records, a lot of missed chord changes. But what they were going for was propelling the music underneath the singing or the instrumental parts. And so you'll hear a lot of that. And, of course, tempo has a lot to do with walking the bass. Like some songs are too fast to walk the bass effectively. And but if you listen to that early Bill Monroe music, you can just hear that influence of the swing era that's in there. And of course, some of the other bands too, like Reno and Smiley, they had a great bass player named John Palmer, who was a great slap player and also did a bit of walking as well. And there's some video footage of him playing with Don Reno and Red Smiley. It's just really great. And I met Tater Tate. You know, he would play with Bill Monroe, and he played bass and fiddle with Bill Monroe. And he had all kinds of crazy slap techniques. And I tried to get him to teach me how to do them, but I could never get them all together, where he would pull the string, slap, and then tap the top of the bass, and then come back up and play. And he had this whole rhythm thing that I just could never figure it out. But he told me that Jethro Burns' brother, H.E., had showed him how to do that when he was on the Old Dominion Barn Dance, which was a barn dance radio show out of I think Richmond or Charleston, Virginia, way back in the 50s. So, but a lot of that stuff is just a raw form of music. You know, it's like the rawness of it. Like if you listen to old big band music, you hear those guys just snapping away on that bass, trying to be heard in an orchestra setting. So that's kind of, I think, what it was kind of born out of. You know, was just trying to propel the sound and get out in front. You know,
it's interesting you're mentioning quite a few things that you mentioned. You know, I never heard about before, and I know that actually a couple guys that I also like had like as guests here, like use that technique that they slap and then hit the bass as well.
Mm-hmm.
So it's one of the previous episodes. So Lucas is Warford is one of the guys that he really mastered that thing.
Yeah.
And another guy that does it, Adam Ben Ezra, he's not using the exact same slap technique like we use when we talk about slap, but he definitely uses slap, and then he does crazy things on the bass. Really cool. You mentioned like early Bill Monroe. The earliest, I think, like songs that Bill Monroe recorded, I think are those, like, maybe I'm wrong here. I'm not that I am into bluegrass, but that's not my main focus. Are those recordings from Kimball Hotel from Atlanta? Are those the earliest Bill Monroe
Possibly some of
recordings?
them. You know, in the early '50s, he was writing these instrumental tunes that were basically blues progressions, and he called them stomps. Bluegrass stomp is one of them.
Okay.
And they had he played with a big downstroke, a heavy downstroke, and so that's why he's in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame, is because Chuck Berry took some of those techniques and those sounds that he heard on the radio and applied them to his guitar playing. And so when you hear Chuck Berry doing those downstrokes and all that stuff, it's all Bill Monroe. It's where it came from. And you know, a lot of people don't realize that in the middle '40s, Bill Monroe was the biggest star on the Grand Ole Opry. He was number one. And then, of course, the nexus was in '45 when Earl Scruggs joined him, and it just became, you know, that full sound as we recognize it today. But leading up to that, even still, he had incorporated a lot of this blues type playing in his songwriting and instrumental compositions.
Those recordings that I'm talking about from those are from the early '40s. I think 1940 and '41. Those that were recorded in a Kimball Hotel, and I believe that was with Cousin Wilbur. I think that he played.
Yeah, Bill Westbrooks.
Sorry. Yes.
Bill Westbrooks was another guy. Yeah, he never successfully negotiated a chord change in his life, but but the timing was there.
Wait, but I thought that Bill Westbrooks was Cousin Wilbur, right?
Yeah, same guy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, okay, because you confused me. Yeah. And I think that he replaced Amos Guerin.
Amos Guerin. Maybe it's Amos Guerin I'm thinking about. One of those guys just missed all the changes on a lot of those recordings.
Okay, you know? I think that was Amos.
But, you know, at the time, it's just a raw form of music. You know, I mean, they're just you know, there wasn't really any refined bass players, I don't think, in the music until Joe Zinken came to Nashville, and he came in the late '30s to play with Roy Acuff. But he had experience playing in riverboats and playing, you know, early forms of jazz and that sort of thing. So he was very well versed in different types of music, and was able to bring that to the music. You know,
he was unbelievable.
And if you listen to a lot of Bill's records, you know, usually he had a session bass player on most of those recordings later. Except for after maybe 1949 or 50. He was always using session guys like Ernie Newton played on a ton of his records in the 50s.
Was Ernie slapping at all?
No, he didn't slap. He did the brush head, you know.
I know he did that. I was just wondering if he was slapping.
I think that kind of eliminates the need for the slap. It doesn't have that. It takes the place of that rhythmic void, I guess, whatever that is. So percussive sound. It's
interesting you mentioned Ernie Newton and right after Joe Zinken, because like 10 or 15 years ago when I discovered the song You Mostest Girl from Bobby Lee Trammell, but version from the 70s, which is a rockabilly version, there's some crazy slapping on it. And I was on tour with Deke Dickerson, and I was determined to find out who was the bass player. He was, of course, never credited. And I found like Bobby Lee Trammell's phone number, and he said like, oh, we recorded, because he was a governor in Arkansas or something.
Really?
And yeah, he said like, oh, we recorded that in, I don't know who was the bass player. Scotty Moore brought him. So we called Scotty Moore, and Scotty was like, was that Bill? Meaning Bill Black. And we're like, no, Bill Black died in 1965. Impossible. Okay. So maybe call DJ Fontana. He was on the session as well. So we called DJ Fontana. That same year, I played with both of them in Memphis. And so we kind of had a connection. And DJ was like, I don't know, but it had to be either Joe Zinken or Ernie Newton or Lightning Chance.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was like, okay, so who was doing the most slapping? And it's like from all three of them, Joe Zinken was kind of the only one that I would say
Yeah, he was featured as he got Slap solos features on the Grand Ole Opry and stuff. So, Four Leaf Clover, that's on YouTube.
Yeah.
You've seen him play that and that. And
was he the only guy that got featured as a slap bass solo artist in the Grand Ole Opry?
I would say so. I mean, he was kind of a predecessor to Billy Linneman as a staff bass player out there. I mean, maybe they kind of switched on and off in the 60s, but I know that Billy Linneman I never heard him slap a bass at all, but okay. That's what was one of Joe's things, it's just part of his great versatility, It's funny because a lot of people, he recorded a lot with Ray Price. And there's a lot of people that think that's Bob Moore playing on a particular song or whatever. And you go to look at the credits and it's Joe Zinken. And so there's a lot of things, Bob Moore probably did more work than anybody in this town, but he couldn't do it all. And so there's just all these other great players. But those are the main guys, of course, Joe came first, I would say, in the late 30s. And then Ernie Newton, of course, he was with Les Paul, Mary Ford when he came here. And then I'm not sure about Light and Chance where he exactly was from, but I got to know him a little bit before he passed away. And he was a real character. He had a job here in Nashville. He was like a goodwill ambassador for the city of Nashville. And he would go out to these convention groups, and he would just meet people and greet them and say hello and tell Nashville stories and answer questions and just be a Nashville personality that people could talk to. And interesting guy. And, later on he got Alzheimer's and a little bit of dementia, but there's some interesting interviews with him, with the guy that runs the Musicians Museum that he just posted recently, because they just restored his bass and the original drum head that he had on it. And they showed how they
Smiling Jay? Is he running? Smiling Jay, is he running?
Well, Jay's the manager of it. Yeah, the guy that backs the whole thing. He did all these different interviews with members of it. And he's got a YouTube channel for the Musicians Hall of Fame. And
check that out.
Had a brief interview with Lightning not long before he passed away.
Interesting. Well, Nashville is definitely one of the music meccas. I remember when I was in Serbia, I was like looking up to Nashville. I was even thinking like, should I move to Nashville or Los Angeles? So then I decided, or California. So then I said, all right, so I'll go California first, then I'll see.
Seems like it worked out all right.
Yeah, it's working out so far until the COVID-19. So
yeah, right.
So then we'll see
in this town, there's always been a hierarchy of session guys, and certain producers use certain people, I'm talking historically 40s, 50s, and 60s and 70s. And then, when I came to town, everything was Roy Husky Jr. He played on everything. If there was a sub for the Opry, or there was a TV show, or there was a session, it would usually be Roy Jr. that would play on it, And after he passed away in '97, there was a lot of people that moved to Nashville. They just kept coming, in droves. It took a lot to fill his shoes. So, of course, at that time I was on the road a lot with Del. So I've never really been much of a session guy. I've done some here and there, and I do a little bit of it. I'm always feel fortunate to get it when I can.
Yeah, it's a different beast. I love being on the road. That was always my thing.
Me too.
And so when did you join Del?
Well, I moved here in 1989, and I came with a band that was slowly disintegrating and splintering off. So when we got here, we lasted maybe 2 years. And then in '91, I ran into Ronnie McCoury at a little festival here at the Opryland Park. And we had actually met before when our band had played a few shows with Del. So we kind of had known each other sort of from a distance and a little bit gotten to know each other, sharing this festival lineups and stuff, and playing some gigs here and there. And but he told me that his mom and dad were looking at real estate and thinking about moving to Nashville and leaving Pennsylvania. They were both in their mid-50s, and they were ready to just kind of go full-time music and kind of establish his boys in the music. So I put my name in for the bass job, and he said, we'll just stay in touch, you know. And in the interim, I ended up going to Japan for 3 months of playing banjo in a band over there at a little tourist trap. And when I came back, they still hadn't moved to Nashville. So then I started playing with a guy named Larry Cordell, who had a weekly gig here in pretty close to where I live in Hendersonville at a place called Bell Cove. He played every Wednesday night. At the time, Larry was really hitting it big with songwriting, and he wrote Highway 40 Blues, which was Ricky Skaggs' arguably his biggest signature song from the mid-'80s. And anyway, he had all these new songs that he was doing in a bluegrass style, and ended up getting a record deal. And I made a record with them playing banjo. And then not long after that, everything started to evolve with the Del McCoury scene. And Ronnie moved to Nashville first, and in February of '92. And a couple of months later, they finally made the move to Nashville, and I went out and played with them, and started then in May of 1992.
And for how long you were in a band?
13 years. I left in 2005, and they've had in 28 years, they've had one personnel change, and that's me and the current bass player, Alan Bartram.
And who was a bass player before you, Jerry?
His name was Mike. Oh God, you had to ask me.
Sorry.
He was with him a couple of years, but he lived in Central Virginia. He didn't have any interest in moving to Nashville, so. But he was with him a pretty good while. He had a sort of different sound with them because he played through an amp, and didn't really play in that sort of, I don't know, rockabilly aggressive style that say somebody like Jerry played in, you know. So
I would love to get Jerry as well on the show. I talked to him about it, and then we're working on it.
Yeah,
and
he just had open heart surgery. He's doing good, but he had a triple bypass, I think.
Oh wow. Marshall Wilburn is asking us, was that Mike Brantley?
Mike Brantley, that's him. Yeah.
Okay.
That's him.
So there you go, folks.
He wound up later on being on a sound crew for a couple of different sound companies that I used to see him all the time. Real nice fella. He was
he a slapper?
No.
No slapper. Okay.
No.
You a couple of times you mentioned when we talk about slap, and then you say that rockabilly approach, and those recordings that I talked about, those from the early '40s, if I remember correctly, they were slapping. There's a slap on it on those songs.
Mm-hmm.
Wilbur was slapping on those recordings, and especially I think Tennessee Blues and Blue Yodel and Honky Tonk Swing. And I think that he even played like some solos in those songs, just single slap, or what you call snap. So I never associated rockabilly slap just an influence on bluegrass. For me, it was kind of like maybe even the opposite way.
Well, bluegrass came before, so
so that's what I'm.
I sort of see it as those '30s big bands. Those guys, they would snap those strings hard, and then because there are only 2-3 microphones, maybe there's one for the rhythm section and one for the vocalist or the featured person, and then one in front of the orchestra or whatever. And so vying for that recorded oxygen, the bass player really had to pull a lot out of the bass. Maybe less finesse at that time. And so I think, a lot of that sort of technique was borrowed into bluegrass because they were having that sort of those same recording issues, and also the same sort of feel in the music. Like I said, it swung, and it had that driving sort of feel to it. And then, of course, when rockabilly came along, It just sort of seems like it was born out of country and bluegrass music, really, in a lot of ways. They all have the same influences, you know. So it's
Absolutely.
like, you know, when you listen to bluegrass or you listen to, say, country music or even traditional, like New Orleans jazz, it all bubbles up from the same sources. It's just through a different lens, and that's what makes it sound different. So, you know, when you hear interviews with Bill Monroe and they say, "What is bluegrass?" He would say, "Well, it's gospel, it's blues, it's Appalachian fiddle tradition, it's the bagpipes, it's all these different things mixed together." And then you could talk to somebody in New Orleans and they'd say, "Well, you know, what is traditional jazz?" And they'd say that it's the same thing, just through another set of influences, you know, because you have all the Caribbean influence that comes up too. So, and it's kind of interesting because, you know, you think about radio back in those days, like WSM is a 50,000 watt clear channel. I've been all the way up in Canada on Lake Superior, and just 6:50 a.m. just booms in up there. And I'm sure it's the same if you go to Jamaica. On a good clear night, you could probably hear Grand Ole Opry crystal clear down there. So all that music, you know, on the airwaves influenced everybody.
That's the beauty of music.
I was in Kauai last year, and I met this guy, Kylan Reese. He lives in Honolulu, and he's a luthier. He's also a Hawaiian music historian and a bluegrass musician. And he pointed out to me that Kentucky Waltz, one of Bill Monroe's most famous songs, is actually a melody from a Hawaiian song. And the best they can figure is that, you know, the Hawaiian music had two major renaissances, one in the 20s and one in the 30s. And of course, Bill Monroe was a dancer on the WLS barn dance in the 30s before he traveled with his brothers. And that's where he heard Hawaiian music for the first time. And so the thinking is that he just lifted that melody from something that the Hawaiians were playing. And it's a traditional Hawaiian song. I wish I knew the name of it, but Peter Rowan knows all about it. He's studied all this stuff. And so there's another influence. You know, if you look at Hawaiian music with a slide guitar, the bending notes and the blues and that sort of thing, not necessarily up-tempo or not necessarily aggressive music, but those little elements have crept in there, you know, that he borrowed these little pieces from all these different things, and it just came out through his style, or became a part of his style.
That's the beauty of music, no borders. So we can borrow or get influenced by anything. You know, I'm from Serbia, and then there's like so many traditional songs that we consider like, all right, so this is a traditional Serbian song, but then it exists in Bulgaria and then, or, you know, Middle East somewhere. It's just like
Right,
a different language. It's just like, all right, so
now that's
maybe
folk music, man. That's folk music. I mean, it just travels and permeates. You know, I mean, that's how the whole American Appalachian tradition is. You know, it's those story songs and fiddle tunes and all that stuff came here, and then it's refined and redefined and maybe rewritten and to adapt to a, you know, history or a certain situation. You know, it's songwriters here in Nashville. They've been borrowing from people for decades, trying not to get caught.
Yeah, I guess so. There's always loopholes. You know what? I would love to hear you play something. Anything you would like to play?
Well, I have to go off the earbuds.
That's
here.
fine. All right, while you're getting ready, I will solo myself.
Can you hear me?
All right, I would like to thank you, all of you, for joining us. Thanks so much. We have Mike Bub getting ready. I'm excited to hear him play. And if you have any questions for him, please write down in the comments. If you'd like to support my effort with Slapstream, please check out the links below. Donations and Patreon. Please check out Patreon. All right, it seems that Mike is ready. So let's do that.
So I use tilt this up a little bit. I use two basses primarily. I have a steel string bass, and this is a K. It's a 50s S model K with the ebony fingerboard It's the deluxe model of a K, basically. This is 1951. And then I have a gut string bass that is an American standard. That is this one. And they're kind of the same. They're just strung differently for doing different things. Some guys in the studio prefer the gut string. I like the steel strings for bluegrass because works great on stage. You only have to tune once. And there's nothing worse than a guy who's emceeing a show and the bass player's back there going. It drives MCs crazy. But anyway, so I use this one a lot. I've been using this one mostly this week. I use a Tomastic spiral chords on here. Fairly low action, but enough to get underneath it. Anyway.
All right. Thank you. I would like later on. I would love to hear you more slapping, though. I do like the bluesy tune. But before we get into that, you mentioned a few times snap and slap, and so I would like to hear what are you doing? What are you using as far as different slap bass patterns, and what kind of terminology are you using for that?
Well, the snap is just and that's just pulling on the string real hard, straight out. And I use that a lot, like as a transition. You can go from loud to quiet, so it adds a sort of dynamic element. Then, of course, there's the single slap, which would be more of a Chicago blues type thing. And that's got kind of a little syncopation to it. It's a little different than, say, it's. And then, you double that. You got double slap. That's a snap and two slaps. And then you got, from there, there's a triple slap. And that's a great one that Jerry McCoury does. You can do it on a waltz time. It's fantastic. I never was able to really get it right. And then from that video I was talking about earlier that the ungentle art of slap bass, I learned how to do the triplet, which was, I always describe it to people. It's a snap and then a palm and then your fingers, but in a triplet. So. And as you learn it, you can get faster and faster. And that's basically all I got. I just weave it all in and out.
So you're counting the slaps of the palm, basically, not the slap of the string. That when the string slaps the fingerboard, that's snap.
Just the pull of the string is snap.
Okay.
But the slap is this coming back to it. So
okay.
The triplet is a snap, palm, finger. And so you kind of go in a circular motion. Is the way that they taught it on there. And I always tell people, when you're learning these things, you have to exaggerate all the motion, because otherwise you'll tighten up and you lose you run out of gas, basically. So I always tell people, eventually, once you get the rhythm of it, you can. Of course, I'm not telling you anything. You probably could do that in double time, but.
No, but I'm interested in terminology because I noticed that especially musicians that belong to different music genres, they call different patterns with different names. I personally prefer like to count both slap of the string and these other slaps that you call, you know. So for me, what's snap for what you mentioned, for me that will be a single slap. And one of the main reasons for that is like when you have like rockabilly people and say like, hey, slap the bass, you slap the bass, and then they all do single slap. I mean the snap or whatever you want to call it. But the names don't matter. You know, you either play or.
Yeah, that's the beginning bluegrass bass right there. There's a big thing in bluegrass music where it's really easy for the bass player to play that backbeat. You know, they don't really mean to, but they do. You know.
Yeah.
And sometimes it competes with the mandolin because that's their spot. So
that's their job.
To get away from that and just play the strings cleanly. You know. But part of it is the different styles of bluegrass. You know, the way that the timing is. You know, there's all these different types of bluegrass. And so there's this thing called mash, which is like the real hard, you know, sort of driving modern bluegrass. And so it has a real defined edge to it, a fine honed edge to the beat, you know. And people always play that offbeat to accentuate it more. Whereas, you know, in Bill Monroe's music, in his later music, you would hear the strings ring a lot longer than get them cut off, you know. So like on Uncle Pen, they would let the strings ring, and it has more of a swing feel because it brings it back on the beat a little bit. It's just a little different, little nuance that a lot of people don't catch. A lot of people just always play like this, like you can see their head moving up and down. But there's a lot of nuance in between there and just sort of laying it back a little bit. And there's a lot of that in Bill Monroe's music. You know, it sort of shifts around in different ways, different sounds or rhythmic feels.
It's all about a pocket. It's all about, you know, I completely agree. You know, the way you lock with other musicians, then you create magic. And
well,
I would
it's also about who you're playing with, because everybody plays a little differently, you know.
Sure.
And especially in bluegrass, we have all these sort of regional sounds, you know, that people play differently in North Carolina and Virginia than they do, say, here in Tennessee, which is all influenced by different things, you know. I think that the Opry bands here in Nashville, like Bill Monroe, Jim and Jesse, the Osborne Brothers, and Flat and Scruggs, the sound of their music is different than a lot of the other, say, Ohio, Virginia, North Carolina. Everybody just plays it a little differently.
And we as bass players are the ones that have to adjust.
That's right.
Yeah, more than solo guys. Yeah. I would like to get, you mentioned something interesting. That's why I grabbed my bass, about that back slap or single slap, the way you call it, or double slap that I call it, we have something like that in the Balkan music. And it's kind of like it has the more of a straight groove, but it's very particular, especially for Romani bands. They play it a lot, or like in Serbia or Bulgaria, in little restaurants or weddings, you can find that groove. Not many bass players use slap, but you know, when they do, it's really cool. I'd like to show you that for a second. How do you hear my bass?
I got it.
All right, let me find the position. Okay. Has that? It's
now when you're getting those trills, are you doing that like
I'm just doing fast, what you're calling double slap, and I'm just doing this, just fast.
absolutely. But just double time, basically.
What do you say?
It's double time, basically.
It's your the one that you call double slap. I call it, for me, it's a part of a triple slap, but I call it a gallop.
Yeah, a
So,
gallop. That's good. Well, there's that also too, where you can go. I can't get it fast enough to work it in, but I don't know. It's
I use that one like with a different parts of my hand, either just fingers or just or a palm, or sometimes I incorporate the thumb as well. It's a little bit different. I like to call it a roll because it's really an ornament, because if you speed up the tempo, that particular pattern stays in its own world, in its own tempo. So it's not, it doesn't change. You can't really show it like slow down or whatever, but it works good for, Kevin is great for that. And then it works great for rockabilly groove. I think that's what you mean. I'll show it for a second and you'll tell me.
Yeah. Yeah, Kevin does that all the time. That's part of
yes.
that video like that too. Yeah.
It's a cool. He used that on and in other people. I think that he made it kind of famous the most, but like decent amount of people use that pattern, and I like it. It's very usable.
The first time I met Kevin, he was playing with Ronnie Dawson.
Yeah.
And I never heard Ronnie Dawson before, but we played this music festival where all these bands that were distributed by the same record distributing company played at this thing. That's the first time I ever saw him play, and it blew my mind, And of course, Ronnie Dawson was just great too, and that was the first time I met him and heard all that stuff going on. Then he told me about that video that he made with Mark, So I was searching back then, trying to find these different techniques.
And it was hard to find. There was no internet. That VHS came out in '95.
Right. I think it's still on VHS.
Yeah, I'm not sure if I talked to them a little bit. If they're gonna do it on it and release it as a DVD. I think they did like a small batch of it, but I'm not really sure. And it
probably could stand to be updated. It's I don't know when they made it. It's back in the late '80s, I guess.
But it's also hard. They made it in '95.
95.
Yeah, but it's hard. But nowadays the DVDs are dead, so it's kind of like pointless, like to release.
Everything's going online.
Yeah, so we have to adjust and switch.
The day the network goes down, it's going to be a big problem.
Excuse me?
I said when the network goes down, that day it's going to be a big problem.
Oh yeah.
We're going to lose everything.
Yeah, I guess so. We got like a couple comments. Let me see here. And let me. All right. Is that called a flam in drum language? I assume that question was for me from Jan Stenzel or Stansel. And I think it could be. It could be. I like calling it a roll. But it's really an ornament. So whatever you want to use it, I like calling it a roll. And all right, so we have Kim Neckerman commenting: is bluegrass per definition always drumless, or would it still be considered bluegrass with a drummer? So this question is for you.
This is one of the biggest myths of bluegrass. The real hardcore bluegrass people say drums, no drums in bluegrass. But if you go to listen to any of the greatest bluegrass ever recorded, which is Flatt and Scruggs, Bill Monroe, the Osborne brothers, Jimmy Martin, it all had percussion on it, whether it was played with a brush on the bass or whether it was played with just a simple snare drum with brushes. Almost all of it has some form of percussion on it. And so what people don't like is a big drum kit. When you see the big drums and everybody's, playing like this, maybe that's an extreme for the bluegrass purists. But the sound of percussion is prominent on every bluegrass record from the 1950s on. And, bluegrass can live without it. Of course, they didn't carry a drummer a lot of times. But I heard a story one time from a bus driver. He was a legendary bus driver named Hoot Borden. He drove Ernest Tubb for years. And he was a real character. And he told me that he took Bill Monroe on the road down to Texas on a 10-day tour down there. And the first night, Bill didn't go over very good because when you play in Texas, people want to dance. It's just what they do down there. And of course, Bill always referred to his music in dance terms, a schottisch or different dance steps and styles. And because he was a dancer. And but Hoot told me, he said, I told Bill, I said, you don't have a drummer. You got to have a drummer up there. He said, I'm the only guy that ever played drums with Bill Monroe and the Bluegrass Boys. He would just get up there and play brushes on a snare, but it gave people enough of that backbeat to be able to dance, make it swing enough to let people dance to his music, which was crucial down there, especially for a crowd that wasn't sitting down, that wanted to dance, or playing a dance hall or whatever. But, if you go back and listen to all that music, there's percussion on all of it. Buddy Harmon played on a ton of it. Willie Ackerman. A bunch of different people.
Just not a big kit. Just not big
no
drum.
Kick drum, just a snare. Of course, at the Opry, they never had drums until the 60s. And even then, they had a little cocktailed snare drum on a high stand was all they would use. It wasn't until later they had a full kit. And even then, they had to hide it behind a curtain or something like that. I did a record with Wanda Jackson a couple of years back. And I said, Wanda, we should go out to the Opry and play some of these songs this weekend. And she said, oh, they don't want to hear my music out there. And I said, really? And so she was telling me, she was a contemporary of Elvis Presley. I think she might have even dated Elvis Presley a little bit. And you probably worked with her. She's an amazing lady.
I played with Wanda, yeah.
And
a long time ago.
She told me the first time she was on the Grand Ole Opry, she used to make her own dresses. She used to wear those little spaghetti strap tassel dresses. And she said, of course, all my music had drums in it. And she says, here I'm at the Grand Ole Opry, and she was there maybe 6 months after Elvis was there. And she didn't have a band. She was using the staff guys. And she said, Ernest Tubb comes over to her and said, Mr. Tubb said, now, Wanda, you're going on next. Are you ready to go? And she said, yes, sir, Mr. Tubb, I'm ready. And he said, well, you're not going on stage like that. And she had to cover up her shoulders. She had to wear, she says I had a fake leather jacket. And they made me wear that out on the stage because I was, I had my shoulders were uncovered wearing that dress. And then she said, I went out there and she said, of course, I didn't have any drums. She said, it was horrible. It was just awful. And she said, I came off the stage. I told my daddy, who was her tour manager at the time, I said, let's get our things and never come back here again.
Wow.
And she just had a bad experience out there. But that was because, they couldn't really reflect the music the way that it was recorded. And I can, I can sympathize with that. But years later, of course, she was out there more. And she's been out there many times since then. But I thought that was just kind of funny,
For sure.
I know that Tom T. Hall in the 70s, he left the Grand Ole Opry because they wouldn't let him bring a trumpet player out there. He had that song called Ravishing Ruby, and they didn't allow any horns out there, apparently. And he said, well, if I can't do what I do on the road, then I'm not going to do it here. And he quit. And eventually he came back, but maybe because of Johnny Cash, because he had trumpets on some of his records. And, there was a new sound and a new thing going on in country music, I guess, for a minute.
Bob Moore did too. I think around the same time as Johnny Cash, or maybe even before Johnny Cash, right?
You mean his record Mexico?
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah, he was kind of ahead of the Herb Alpert thing. A guy that helped him produce those records, I can't remember his name, had brought a recording back actually from Europe and said, this is the hottest thing going over there. And so Bob made that record, Mexico. And he was a huge hit. And then, of course, Herb Alpert became an international superstar after that, off the success of his records in the 60s. My parents had all those records. I know all that stuff. Herb Alpert and Baja Marimba Band, which was all the Wrecking Crew super session guys out there, played on all that stuff.
And the record that you talked about with Wanda Jackson, which one is that? Is that the one that she did with Jack White?
No, it was the one she did after that. Justin Earl, the late Justin Earl, produced that record.
Oh, okay.
He did it after the Jack White record. A couple of really great things happened for her right in there. You know, Jack White produced that record, and then she had this young guy managing her who got her on the Adele tour. And the next thing you know, she's sort of had a resurgence in popularity. And that Jack White record did really well for her. She did all the big TV shows. And then the next album was Justin Townes Earl produced. And I knew him through his dad, working with his dad a little bit here and there. And so he pulled me in on that. And that was, that was a real learning thing for me because I'd never really recorded with a band like that, you know. Kenny Vaughn on guitar, a guy named Skylar Wilson on piano, and Brian Owings on drums. Brian plays with Emmylou Harris, but he's a master of all the different blues styles and shuffles and all that kind of stuff. He knows that music inside and out. So he was able to lend a real great feel to all that stuff. And I really enjoyed it. It was fun. It's a great album. Is it a
rockabilly record?
Yeah, for the most part, yeah.
So you were slapping a lot.
Called Tore Down.
Oh, okay.
Tore Down was one of the songs on there.
So were you slapping a lot on that record?
There's a little bit of it on there, but you know, not 100% full throttle slapping.
I would love to hear you still, slapping full on. First time I heard you slapping was on Jules Holland.
Jules Holland, yeah.
Yeah. I think that was right after Mark told me about you. Or no, like I saw you first with Jules Holland because that's when I was still living in Serbia. And then I met Mark, and then he told me about, I forgot what was the record that he recommended me to find from you.
Well, when I was with Dell, we made a record with Steve Earle, and
I know that.
And that's Texas Eagle, the very first one. Yeah, was I just let it rip on that one? But
I'm familiar with that one.
I didn't know what I was doing. I was just making it up, but they kept it. When I hear songs about train songs, I always tell people, I said, if you just listen to the lyrics, it'll dictate what to play on and how to play something, So if you hear a song that's got walking, talks about walking, well, walk the bass, it just lends itself to the lyric. Same thing with a train or whatever, with a slap, that kind of thing. So I always borrow the inspiration from the lyrics of a song.
That's a good approach. And I think that on that record with there's also is Asheville Turnaround the same kind of crazy also on that same record, or that's like with Del McCoury?
That's with Del McCoury. That was a Verlin Thompson song. And I put some slap stuff on that.
Yeah, I remember I remember that.
I had a little snippet of a solo in there, so
Yes. That's why I have a mental note.
Yeah.
Those and the solos from the Jules Holland show, because that's what they were playing regularly over there in Serbia. So I was able to.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
That Jules show was amazing. It was right in the middle of our tour with Steve Earle and all over UK. We did Europe and UK, and on that show was a band called the Cardigans from Sweden.
Oh yeah, I remember.
Sort of a pop type band, and then Chrissy Hine and the Pretenders were on there, and then the Mavericks, and then and they had a bunch of guys from Nashville playing in their band, so we knew a bunch of them. We all stayed at the same hotel for some reason with the Mavericks.
Oh, cool.
The Mavericks were playing at a Royal Albert Hall. They were there for like 5 nights, completely sold out. They were huge over there in London and England, and then there was a band. It was an indie rock band, the Oddballs, a band called Gay Dad. And I don't think that they lasted very long. I haven't heard about them in a while, but
I never heard about him.
I never had either.
All the other bands,
but
very well.
But what was interesting, the guy from Gay Dad came over to talk to us, and he was a big Clarence White fan, guitar fan, and Bluegrass fan. So it's just funny that people that are into music, they listen to so many different kinds of music, and whatever you're hearing may not be exactly everything that's incorporated into what they're interested in. You know, so it's pretty fascinating to find out those things. You know.
Well, music stories are the best. Just talking to people that spend some time on the road and just like hear their experience is something, you know, that I kind of cherish the most.
Yeah. Well, you know, that's all, you know, storytelling is all part of being a musician. I mean, we've all got these just crazy stories. We all get into crazy stuff, but you know, that Jules Holland show was an amazing production. They did it in a big giant studio in BBC, and all the bands are set up in a circle. I don't know, have you ever been there or done it?
I never been there, but I've seen, you know, lots of, you know.
And so everybody's set up in this big circle around in this studio's the size of an aircraft hangar. And Jules Holland would have his microphone, and he would go, "Here they are, the Mavericks," and he would turn around, and they would be right behind him, and a big 360. You know, it was really a neat concept for a show to get that many bands in one room
Absolutely.
together, and so many different sounds. You know, it was really a cool thing to do.
I mean, and what bands? I mean, it was just amazing. The lineup he had for all those, you know, for all those years, like, top notch.
Well, if you know, that was the show to land if you could do it, if you could get on there, you know. And luckily for us, you know, being associated with Steve Earle, he was very prominent over there at the time.
Oh,
so
the reason for the show, for your appearance at the show was Steve Earle, not Del.
Well, we did it with Steve Earle. Yeah, it was part of the tour that we were on with Steve over there.
And then I remember seeing you play a couple times after I moved to the States. I think Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. And once where I actually met you, it was Great American Music Hall.
Oh,
in San Francisco.
Was that with Del then?
With Del, yes.
Yeah. Yeah, I only did Hardly Strictly once with Del, and the rest of the times I've been there was with Tim O'Brien.
Oh, okay. Have you ever slapped with Tim?
Yeah, a little bit here and there. Yeah.
Okay. So nobody ever tells you like, do not slap or something? Or you hear that occasionally?
Nobody's ever told me that, but I try to restrain myself, you know. I really like playing behind singers. That's something that I really enjoy. I'm not really an instrumental guy. Like, I mean, I know all the traditional bluegrass instrumentals, but I'm not into really heady instrumental music. As I tell people, I'm more into melody than I am conceptual music. So I'm not as good at improvising and that sort of thing because I'm not really a schooled bass player. Everything I do, I just kind of make up. But I really like playing behind singers. And so I like to lead a singer and I like to accentuate what they're doing. And so one of the key things is not get in their way. You not compete for the oxygen with them, you know. And so sometimes if it's not, you know, some kind of hard driving rockabilly type feel, then I would stay away from it, you know. And maybe that's what's gave me some work. I don't know, you know.
Would you ever play like solos that are not slapped, like a pizzicato, like melodic solos, or like
not
a grandfather's rock, like old style?
Not much, and I avoid solos like the plague. I hate taking solos. You know, it's just I always tell people, look, if you're going to give me a solo, do it at the end of the set and give me one, and that's it. I don't want to do any more after that because really, when you talk about putting on a show for people. When you do something that's unexpected, it has a great impact. And then once you do it again, it's not such a great impact anymore. They don't remember it, you know. It's the same with guitar solos in bluegrass. A lot of people think that, you know, every song, because a guy plays lead guitar, should take a break on every song. And I don't view music that way anymore. Like everybody needs to solo and everybody needs a piece of the action. I like to think of the song as a miniature movie. And sometimes not every instrument takes a solo. Sometimes things are orchestrated where you're playing lines together with people, creating, just fortifying the melody or the sort of the essence of a song rather than using it as a vehicle to solo over. And so I sometimes it gets a little tedious for me, but I like it when they just, you know, if you're going to use a bass solo, use it for effect and use it at the right spot, you know, and don't overdo it. You know,
I love your solos, and I always wanted to hear more.
Well, that's what I want. See,
Yeah.
leave them wanting more.
Well, that's a good strategy. It's working for me. How about I would like to hear you some slapping. Can we do that?
Some slapping.
Some slap solo, like
All right.
as long as you want.
Well, I don't really solo, so I don't know what I would play, but I'm gonna go back off of the. I gotta go back off the earbud.
All right, here I am again while Mike is getting ready. He's grabbing his bass and he's ready. All right.
So there's a couple little things I like to do, like an ending of a song. I like slapping in the key of E. E is fun to play slapping in, and there's one song I cut with Dell called "I'll Be There," which is an old Ray Price song. We did Bluegrass, and at the very end, instead of just going, like ending a song typically like that, I did and just little things like that is usually what I do, using the slap. So it gives a good forceful ending instead of, just straighter. Talking about early bluegrass and that sort of thing, you hear in a lot of the early bluegrass where my accent's so low on this gut string bass. Just popping that string out, getting more of a drive out of it, rhythmically, more of an edge to it. But I don't know. Here's a little bit of Jake Tulloch and Little Darling Pal of Mine. You gotta kick the back of the bass. That's part of it. Especially if you got some hard-soled shoes. Anyway, there you go.
I remember that he was doing that. That's so cool. Thanks so much.
They got a song called "You Know How to Drop in the Bucket."
You should incorporate more of your slapping, more of your solos. But it might be just me. But I just love the way you play it. I have a question. Like, so technically, when you do it, I noticed that you've been doing it like with the middle finger, and sometimes you do it with a point finger. So
yeah, I get more out of my middle finger on a pull, especially on the low string. But then there's other times where I'm using my index, this way. Kind of depends. Go back to this other bass. It's easy to play the low string with my middle finger. I just get more behind it. For the other strings, I use my index, but that's all index. In there, I switched to the middle finger. The index. To the middle. And I don't know, it just kind of comes natural to me, playing, alternating. But mostly on the lower strings, I'll use for sure my middle finger down on the low. And when I'm doing that, a lot of times I'm playing with two fingers, the two. Sometimes I'll play with two fingers, or my middle finger will just follow with my index. Sometimes I play with two. Just kind of depends. Now, I'll show you this other thing. I use one of these wire mutes on here. A lot of bluegrass guys like these. They use these. I first saw a guy named Alan Mills use it on his bass. And he always played on gut strings, but it really helps with the amp sound. And what it does is it's a mute, but it gives it a sort of a softer, rounder sound, especially with steel strings. It'll make it sound more like a gut string, even though you'll still get that sustain that you get with a steel. But if I take it off, oops, that doesn't sound good. It makes the bass sound kind of wonky. And when I put it back on, it's just sort of a warmer version of it. It also balances the bass out. If you have like a loud D string, which is common, where your bass goes it'll even that out or help alleviate that problem.
And who started doing that? Do you know?
The first guy I ever saw do it was a fellow named Alan Mills. Played in a bluegrass band called the Lost and Found out of Virginia. And then I started seeing other bluegrass guys do it. Mostly guys that were playing out of an amp. It would give them more of a, I guess it would help with the feedback from an amp.
And it would give them less of a metallic sound? Is that what
Definitely with the steel strings. Yeah, it takes sort of the edge off of steel strings for sure.
So would you use...
I've always used it. Always used one. People go, why do you have a mute on there? And it's like, well, it sounds good. That's why.
So would you use it on your gut string bass as well, or just steel string?
I have. You know, it has the same effect on the guts too, especially if you have a blend of strings. Like on mine, I have two vintage art tone gut strings, and then I use obligato on the A and E. Probably not the best combination, but it helps balance those out a little bit.
So, like, let me ask you then about your strings in general. So you're using domestic Spyrocore. Is it like an orchestra medium on your steel string bass?
The heavies, yes, orchestra.
Okay, and what bass is that?
That's on my K bass. It's a
K bass, okay.
And it's an S model K, so it's got the ebony fingerboard and everything. And I really, over the years, I've always had K basses. I've never had a good bass ever, a real bass, you know.
Mm-hmm.
But over the years, I've kind of learned how to hot rod them to get the most out of them. And I've always found that the K basses, you know, because they were made in a factory, basically they're made out of molds. Every one of them is exactly the same. They're pretty much the same. A lot of people say, well, this bass sounds better than that K bass. This K bass sounds better than that K bass. But really it comes down to the setup. And you can set them all up the same and you pretty much get pretty much the same out of every one of them. So there's a couple things that I've done on mine. For one thing, a lot of the K basses, the neck angle is really low. So you see a lot of bridges that are cut down. And so what my luthier did was he stuck this little spacer in here, which is like, you know, between 1/4 and 1/2 inch. And it pushes the neck out so I can get a taller bridge. Get in the light better here. Let's see. Back door's coming in there. So it's a taller bridge than normal. A lot of times they're, you know, you see a bridge on a K bass and it's completely cut down. It's real short. So you get more volume and you get a little bit better action if you can get a higher bridge on there and get the neck angle out some more. Doesn't change the angle, it just pulls it out some more so you get a higher bridge on there.
I never knew that. I never owned K bass, and you know, when I was in Europe, like nobody was even talking about K basses. And
well, that's because they don't exist over there. You know, they're just not there.
Kinda, yeah.
So I mean, they were made here in the U.S. and I've always imagined that they were basically designed for kids and students. You know, they used to be, you know, in the 50s and 60s and 70s, every high school in America had K basses in them. They made thousands of them. I mean, literally thousands and thousands of these things. And the necks are small. They fit kids' hands. They're durable because they're made out of plywood. And so I don't think they traveled around the world that much. And then they had competitors, which is where the American Standard came from. American Standard is very similar, just a little different design in the detail and the way that the neck is connected and that just the way that it's all shaped. Just a little different design, but the same concept. Mm-hmm. And again, they were all, you know, mostly school basses is what they were, unless there was some professionals that used them for because they were either cheap or because they were durable. to, you know, ride around in a car or whatever. So they're perfect for bluegrass. They're perfect for bluegrass because you can hardly mess them up, you know. I mean, I don't even care about this thing. I leave it in my truck for days. I don't even bring it in and out. I don't worry about any of that stuff, you know. I do have a cover for it, but I don't worry about dings or anything like that. If I had a real valuable bass, I would be a lot more concerned about it, you know. And if it starts to come apart, you know, usually you can hear, like if your bass starts losing volume or it's got losing a character or whatever, if you look around, usually it's a seam coming loose on it, you know. And that's all fixable, you know. But yeah, I don't worry about them too much. I'd rather play stuff that I don't have to worry about. Daily drivers, they call them.
Yeah.
Now, I did buy a really nice bass recently at an estate sale. I bought a Tyrolean bass from the 1800s.
Oh, nice.
And I got really lucky. I'm an estate sale junkie. I go to estate sales every weekend, find stuff. And this was the thumbnail picture for this estate sale was the bass. And I kept looking at it and go, man, that thing's old. It's got the big bonnet tuners on it and everything. So I got down there. It was in Murfreesboro, which is about 30 miles from here. So I got down there about 1 in the afternoon, the first day of the estate sale. And I said, you guys still have that bass down here? And they go, yeah, it's in the back room. And I go back there. It's like, holy, it's crazy. You know, this thing was made in the 1800s. It's got 2 stickers in it, one from a repair in 1895 and another one from the 1930s. And it's held together with, they used to patch cracks with cloth. They put cloth on it and then they put glue on it. And so there's all these little cloth patches in it. And those Tyrolean basses, they don't have a neck joint, a neck block. It's like a spar that comes off the neck and then connects to the back somehow. And so a lot of the modern players that use or find these basses, they'll have them reconstructed and put a neck block in to improve the sound of it. But I didn't really know what I had when I got it. And they also had in that same estate sale was a Dan Electro electric bass, lipstick pickup, black Dan Electro, like you'd buy out of Sears catalog in the 60s. Perfect condition with a case, everything. And I bought the 2 basses for $1,000. And I came home and I told my buddy about them. And he said, how much do you want for that Dan Electro? I said, $800. I said, come over here and get it. And I sold it that same day, basically. So I got that Tyrolean bass, which is, you know, 200 years old. I got $200 in it so far. I haven't got it restored yet. So the first thing I did was I took it to Edgar Meyer because I didn't know anything about it, you know. I called him up and I said, I got this bass. I really want you to check it out. It's old, really old. And of course, his bass is 100 years older than that one. But
yeah.
I went over to Edgar's house and he said, now I don't know anything about basses. He goes, I can't tell you what it is. I can't tell you what it's worth. He said, I don't know anything about that. He said, I've just played a lot of them, you know. And I said, well, that's good. I wanted you to get your opinion on it, you know. So this thing hadn't been played in years, and the bridge, you know how sometimes people cut the bridge down and there's the strings are down like a 1/4 inch down into the bridge. Like they make slots for the strings to go through.
I saw that, yeah.
And these terrible strings on there. Well, he takes his bow and he just starts cranking on it with his bow, and he brought that thing to life, man. I was just like, whoa. And he said, man, that A string sounds good. I said, yeah, but those strings are crap and the bridge is crap. I said, how are you getting all that sound out of there? He goes, if it's in there, no matter what condition it is, he goes, you'll hear it. You'll hear that it's in there. And he said, this has got some good notes to it. He said, it's worth, looking into getting it restored and this and that. And I said, all right, well, let me ask you about that. And he says, you got to be careful. He said, you could take this thing to some guy in New York and they'd get a bill for $10,000. He goes, that's happened to me before. He said, so I would take it around and show it to people and just see what people say about it, you know. So I did. I went and showed it around a few people here in town, but I still haven't taken the plunge to have somebody put it together. I just have it sitting in my storage unit. But eventually I'll get that thing up and running.
Yeah. And when was that? Like, when did you get that?
I bought it last year.
Oh, wow. Okay. So fairly recently.
Yeah.
Carolyn D just asked you, what does the Tyrolean bass sound like and how is the tone different? So I guess you can't really answer.
A Tyrolean bass is what they call a poor man's Italian bass. It's from that Eastern European area, Italy and France, sort of on the eastern side, probably where the Romany music comes from, that kind of stuff. And so I would imagine that it's, they were cheaper made because they didn't have quite as many appointments to them. But the wood on this thing is just fantastic. The maple on it is just beautiful. The figure in it, but I think they're just a typical carved type bass, a European carved bass. They're just constructed a little bit differently than a typical one. Like I said, no neck block in it. The neck is it's got this spar thing that comes and connects to the back, and it all holds together at the neck. At the heel of the neck is where the sides and the ribs come up and attach there, instead of to a neck block. So
sounds like a good sale.
Yeah, I got lucky. Well, we'll see. I don't know what it sounds like, but
well, it's definitely more than $200.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, that's my big problem, is trying to figure out if I need to sell it as is or sell it restored. Would I get my money back out of it if I had it restored? Is it something that I would want to hang on to? I don't know. Me and really good instruments, I don't really have that many really great instruments. Everything I've got is pretty much, used and abused.
Oh, well, whatever is working for you. And it's, if it sounds good, it sounds good. It doesn't matter how, much it costs, or, magic is in the fingers.
Well, that's true. But you definitely want to have your instrument working for you rather than against you. And,
absolutely.
A setup is so important to get it set up right for you, and learn what works best for you. And like I say, over the years, I've just kind of figured out how to hot rod these K basses. My guy that works on my basses here, Randy Hunt, we've come up with all these different things. But for the most part, if I can buy a K bass for, say, under $2,000, or even better, under $1,500, or even better in two pieces with a neck out of it, then I can get everything done to it that I want for about $1,000. And that would include a new end pin, of course, a new bridge and adjusters, and then reset the neck so that it'll accommodate a taller bridge. Then I always put an ebony nut at the top, just for better tone coming off of there. And I really prefer an ebony fingerboard if you can get one, or if you can find a bass that has that. Although a rosewood is fine, but it seems like the ebony board is really the best for the best tone, and the best for slap bass too. It seems like to me. Now, if you're playing through an amp all the time, that's totally different. Then none of that stuff matters as much, because you're dialing the tones and you're making it happen in a different way. But just acoustically speaking, which I do a lot, I don't use an amp unless I'm playing with a drummer for the most part. And I just like to use a microphone more than anything. I think a microphone is the best for I go and do these, sessions and whatever, a TV thing, and they'll say, I want to take a line out of your pickup. And I go, no, you're not taking it. So microphone's all you're going to need on this, So a lot of guys, the sound guys, they don't always want to have that pickup. And to me, it can ruin the sound if you let them have too much of it. I've had that problem with in the studio, where they took a feed off of the pickup, and it's all pickup and no microphone in the mix later on when you hear it back, and you go, they use too much pickup, But that's just my personal taste. So the best thing is to just avoid it altogether. So I have a travel bass too, which is a 53K M model that I have a neck just unbolts and comes off, and so it's basically
who made it travel?
My buddy Randy Hunt here in Nashville. The first guy I saw that had one was a fellow named Scott Mulvihill. He was playing with Ricky Skaggs at the time, and he had a little Instagram video of him putting his bass together. And I'm like, wait a minute, that's a K bass. So I texted him. I said, is that a K bass? He goes, yeah. And I said, man, you just changed my life. Yeah, for the longest time, I was using one of these Chadwick basses, which are very, basically Charlie, he's a good friend of mine. Charlie basically changed the entire business of traveling with an upright bass with his design of the folding bass. And, but unfortunately, it doesn't work acoustically as much for me. it just didn't have the kind of volume, mainly because the back is in 3 pieces. So it just doesn't vibrate the way it's supposed to for what the kind of music that I play. A lot of people love them and use them and this and that, but it was just I never got comfortable with it enough to make it feel like this is the ultimate way to go for a travel bass. And then I saw a bolt-on neck K bass, and I thought, this is it. This is what I want. And my setup is really simple. It's just I bought a case from Chadwick, just for the body of the bass. And then I carry the neck and all the parts in a shoulder gig bag that I can carry on a plane. Mm-hmm. And it's a Reunion Blue, so it's kind of hard-sided, so I can check it if I need to. I can gate check it, and it'll be okay, you know. And again, this was a bass that I bought on eBay. Didn't have any parts on it. It was a school bass up in New York. And I bought 2 basses and 6 cellos from this auction up there. It was like a school that was getting rid of a bunch of old instruments. They'd replaced everything with new Chinese instruments after trying to keep the old instruments going and robbing parts from them and everything. And finally, they just, they cleaned out the junkyard. And so I had a bass that the heel had never been broken, the neck heel. Uh-huh. And so that was a good candidate for a travel bass. Although it could break at any time. I need to have a little carbon fiber put in there to support that. But for the most part, it's worked out pretty good. And it because it's not glued together, it's bolted together. That might affect the sound just a little bit on it. But for the most part, it's basically another K bass, which is just an easy transition for me from going from one bass to another. That was kind of the best solution for me. I'll show you I'll get it right here. Let me show you the case.
Yeah, please.
So this is what I carry the neck in and the parts, and it just fits in here like that. Pretty simple.
How long does it usually take you to make it into one piece?
5 minutes.
Oh, wow.
It's pretty quick. And it settles in. I use the Tomastics on there, and they settle in really quick. They don't, you don't have to stretch them out or anything.
That's great. So how many basses do you own?
How many basses?
Upright basses, yeah.
Well, I've got my old original bass, which is a 54K. That's back here in the corner. I don't know if I can reverse my camera. Where is it? There it is. Back there. I played that thing for years, and it's a great bass. I had a new fingerboard put on it, and I just never really got used to it with a new fingerboard. And I have this 51, which I bought from a lady up in Pennsylvania. I was at I won't give too much away here, but I was at a festival in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, and a lady came up to me, and my eBay handle is Drink and Drive, all one word, Drink and Drive. And she comes up to me and she says, "Are you Drink and Drive?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "I'm Bass Monkey." I said, "Oh." And we had been in some bidding wars over some basses through the years. And really neat lady. She owns an amazing assortment of basses. And she's from up in Pennsylvania, not far from Baltimore. And her husband at the time was a master craftsman. The guy could build furniture. He was a fabricator. He could make anything. One of these kind of guys. Had a full machine shop, could do car body work, everything. So what she did was she would buy these basses, and he learned how to fix them, and then they sold them. And she also collected them. And she had a bunch of Epiphone basses, including the very first Epiphone bass, 001, first one ever made. And she loved the Epiphone basses, and she was going to write a book about them. Matter of fact, you can go online and find her website, Bass Monkey, if you look for her on there. She's got a bunch of stuff she's written about the Epiphone bass and the variety of basses that she had. And anyway, her husband passed away, and she sold off a lot of the unrepaired basses. And somebody had sent me a YouTube link to these basses that she had for sale. And that's where I saw this 51 S model. So I sent her a note, and I said, just put my name on that. I said, I'll take that one sight unseen. The neck was out of it. And I went up there then a week or two later and went up and got it. And then I ended up getting the art tone strings that I have on this American Standard bass. I got those from her as well. And they've been on there for 5 or 6 years. They just won't give out. They're incredible. And anyway, she had like, you know, an amazing number of basses. She told me that my buddy Ron Shuffler came up there and bought 9 from her. And,
wow.
and he wanted the one that I had my name on. And I said, I'm glad I called ahead. He went up there and just loaded a van full of them, you know. I don't know if you know Ron. Ron is George Shuffler's brother.
Oh, okay.
And he's a great bass player, and he's a horse trader, and he collects basses, and he buys and sells them.
Oh, okay.
He's always looking for them. Interesting guy.
You mentioned like an ebony fingerboard. Do you have ebony fingerboards on all your basses?
For the most part, yeah. I didn't tell you. I got a couple more of these K basses. I have one that I had restored for a buddy of mine. I'm going to take it up to New York and just put it in his apartment in New York City so that I'll have a bass there to use, and then he'll have one for his house jam sessions and stuff. He lives right in Manhattan, and but I haven't been able to take it up there yet. And that's a 50s, early 50s K also. That one has just a regular rosewood board on it.
Okay.
And then I have a C model bass that I got in the same school auction. I've never put that together. And then I got my travel bass, and then I also have a Chadwick travel bass as well.
So that's about 10 basses.
Yeah, I got a bunch of them. And that Tyrolean, and 6 cellos. I sold one of the cellos to Stuart Duncan.
Do you play cellos, or you just
no? They had these cellos in the same auction that the basses were in. I bought them for $60. I got 6 cellos for $10 a piece. And there was 2 half size. There was a really nice German factory cello, and there was like two good cellos in there. They were carved, nice instrument. One was a Juzek, and then there's also an Engelhardt in there, which is like a laminated cello. But I haven't done anything with them. The little small ones, I'm going to make lamps out of. I want to make like little bass lamp out of those. But they're all in disrepair. They're junk really. But I sold one to Stuart Duncan. He bought one for $100, so I made $40 on the whole deal so far. And I couldn't resist. I had to have them. Wow,
you're a good salesman.
Now I'm an eBayer. I was always looking on eBay for stuff.
Nice. Like some people really enjoy it, like doing that. Yeah.
Well, I have a rule about buying stuff. Don't buy anything that's broken. But if it's an instrument, usually if you get it for a decent price, you can get it repaired and still be within the value of the instrument. It's one of the problems with K basses is that you can get one cheap, but once you put about $1,200-$1,500 in it, it's really only worth what you have in it. They haven't really gone up that much in value through the years. I mean, it's been a long thing, but like if you get a really nice S model, like an S9, the blonde with the purfling and the ebony stuff from the 50s, a lot of times those things are about $4,000, But the American Standard basses seem to be a lot rarer and harder to find. And I bought mine, this one. I have 2. I haven't bought that. I forgot I got another American Standard in my storage too that I bought out of Houston. That was a school bass that somebody bought and had on eBay. But this one I bought from an auction house in Kansas City, and they had tried to make it into a 5-string bass, and it failed, and the top caved in on it, or the bass bar came apart, and so they just junked it, and then eventually they sold it, and they put it back as a 4-string bass. And then when I went to pick it up, I couldn't see the photos, and they didn't say that the sound post was starting to come through the top. And I got there and I said, well, this thing's not even repairable now, and the guy's like, well, I told you it wasn't playable. And I go, well, non-playable and non-repairable is two different things. And so anyway, I brought it back, and it's a 1938 American Standard. So they're kind of in they were in vogue, and still are, because that's what Roy Husky played, was that American Standard bass. But his was all hands and heart, But anyway, the guy that works on my bass is Randy Hunt. That was one of his first big restoration projects here in Nashville. And he managed to put it back together and did a great job. It's probably due for a little bit of tweaking since it's been about 10 or 12 years. But I go between those two basses mainly, just depending upon what I'm playing.
I have a question about your style of playing. How did you develop your own style? Like, who were like the main influences, and also like Slap? If I understand, it was mostly coming from Jerry and Kevin and Mark, I guess. But who were your main influences, and then how did you develop your own style?
Well, as a teenager, I grew up in Scottsdale, Arizona, which is a little community, a part of Phoenix, and we had a performing arts center there, and they had a great jazz series there every year. So I could ride my bike to this performing arts center, and I could buy a ticket for $6, and I saw all the jazz greats back in the late 70s and early 80s that were still around. And all those bands had the greatest bass players. And like I said, I saw Milt Hinton play with the New York Jazz All-Stars there, and several others. And so just by watching and seeing how these guys played and how they placed their hand, like this is something that you always see, classical bass players hold their hand like this. This is a whole step here, And I kind of figured that out, and I kind of tried to just emulate what they were doing. And that was kind of early on. And then when I got to Nashville, I got to be around so many great bass players, one being Roy Husky Jr., and just the way that he was able to get so much sound out of an instrument, it was uncanny, really. The guy would play over a microphone and just fill a room full of bass sound. Incredible. And then there's guys like Terry Smith, who has been here in Nashville forever, always been a sideman on the Grand Ole Opry. He was with the Osborne Brothers for years. And to be honest with you, I've never heard Terry Smith miss a chord change ever. I mean, the guy is just such a solid, accurate bass player, and really, really good. And he's really doesn't get the credit that he deserves, because he's that good, and he just sort of, you just take it for granted in the sound. He plays in a band called the Grascals, and currently I've been filling in a few shows for him. And then I had a roommate named Terry Eldridge, who is one of the best bass players I've ever heard. And he played guitar and sang harmony with the Osborne Brothers for 12 years. He started out on the upright bass, and then he moved over to guitar to sing harmony. And then Terry Smith joined the band. So being around those two guys, started to teach me a lot about bluegrass, or at least the bass playing in Nashville. Because I didn't know who Bob Moore was when I got here. I had no idea who he was. And then I met Kent Blanton not long after that, and Superman, we call him. And he's just a wealth of traditional country music information here. And he's a local. He's from Nashville, and he has a great archive of information, of session notes and calendars. And of course, he has Joe Zinken's bass, and so he's just always been a great resource as well. But when I got here and I started, really listening to country music like Tom T. Hall, Loretta Lynn, I was so bluegrass focused for so long until I came here to Nashville and really got to understand country music, and then realized, who these different bass players were on these different records. But so my style is really pulled from a lot of that. It's pulled from experience of just having to play. You know, when I joined Del McCoury's band, I was, you know, I've been playing for 10 years, self-taught, but I didn't really know what I was doing. I was just, you know, making it up, and I didn't really concentrate and focus on it until I got in that band. And like I say, I saw Jerry play, and I wanted to take some of those elements and put that into my playing and keep that in the music. And it sort of gave me a signature sound and sort of a direction to go under, you know. And so it's just, you know, and I listen. As you can see, I got a big record collection back here. I don't know if you can see it back there. But I collect bluegrass, country, and jazz records. Mostly, I really like jazz guitar, and especially most of the music I listen to is, you know, 50 years older. I don't listen to much new music, hardly at all. Not that I don't like it; it's just that I like the sound of those older records, you know, the 50s and 60s.
There's something about it, some magic going on over there.
Well, they just recorded, you know, when you hear that transition between cutting to disc, and then when we went to tape, it changed everything, you know. And the tape it just sounds so good, you know. But I had the good fortune to get to know Bob Moore a little bit and go over to his house a few times and just be around him and ask him, you know, dumb questions. And I wish I could have spent more time with him, and maybe I will get a chance to someday. But just being around guys like that. And there's another guy here in town named Chris Scruggs, who is a real roots music action figure, and he is a great bass player as well. Of course, he plays in Marty Stewart's band now, but he you know, he does everything from real traditional country and bluegrass to indie rock stuff, you know. So very broad music base. Funny story. I was playing with Chris Scruggs, and this guy Billy Robinson was playing the steel. Billy Robinson grew up in East Nashville with Bob Moore. They went to grade school together, and they had a band when they were teenagers called the Eagle Rangers. Anyway, I'm playing with Chris Scruggs, and Billy Robinson's on steel. He's in the Steel Guitar Hall of Fame. Billy Robinson was backing Hank Williams the first time he ever played on the Grand Ole Opry, because he played for Red Foley on the Prince Albert show, and he toured Europe with Red Foley, with Minnie Pearl and Hank Williams and so on and so forth. So anyway, we're there, and Bob Moore comes to the show, and I'm thinking, God, you know, I got to play in front of Bob Moore of all people, you know. Well, welcome to Nashville. So Chris is you know, he's just such a nice guy. So he says, hey, let's get Bob Moore up to play one. What do you say? Let's get Bob Moore up here. What do you say? And so Bob Moore comes up. Well, he's about 6 beers in or so. And he just grabs a hold of my bass. And, of course, I got steel strings, which he never played on steel strings. He was a gut string guy all the way. And he says, you know, I don't want to play anything. I just want to talk about Billy Robinson. And so he starts telling these stories, you know. And so finally Chris says, well, let's play a song. Let's play a song, Bob. How about Sweet Dreams? Well, there's 2 ways to play Sweet Dreams. There's Patsy Cline's Sweet Dreams, and there's Farron Young's Sweet Dreams. And Chris does the Farron Young version of it. Of course, Bob played on Patsy Cline's version of it. So all of a sudden they go into the song, and they're just playing it in 2 totally different sort of approaches. And I thought, God, this is the one night in Nashville that Bob Moore's going to actually make me sound pretty good. It was just a funny moment, and just neat to see him play. I went to one session when Bob Moore was playing, and that was it was just great to watch. You know, it was all these old school session guys were there, and my buddy Kurt Story, who's a recording engineer here in town, was really good friends with Bob and used to use him on sessions and stuff. And even after he retired, he would come and play on some things because they were buddies. And just to watch Bob Moore, like when it came time to record, the focus of his mind, like he was when he set up to go, that was it. You know, there was nothing to distract him. He was looking at that chart and just playing the timing and the whole thing, and just amazing. I just really cherish those little short moments that I got to be around, you know, some of those guys like that. when they
I'm
were
sure.
working.
How long ago was that that show with Chris Scruggs and like when?
That's probably about 10 years ago, maybe, or 8 years ago,
Okay.
something like that.
Bob doesn't play much anymore, right?
No, he doesn't really get out that much these days.
Okay.
He and his wife are pretty much at the house, and I've been over there a few times. We go over and watch football with him, and played his bass a little bit. He has a beautiful French bass that he used on a lot of sessions, and that's in his bedroom, and he keeps it in there. But
does he still play?
Does he still play?
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, at
he plays a little bit. And matter of fact, a couple of years ago, my buddy Kurt had him over at a party, like a picking party, and they gave Bob the bass, and man, he was just like, he just went right to it. Like his hands, they just naturally fit the bass, and I call his finger the hook because he's got this finger that just, I mean, it's like this long. It's just amazing how much finger he uses. I gotta get in the camera, but he uses his entire finger from one end to the other, you know, when he pulls that string. And just, you know, sweet guy. I made some videos of him that night. I might send them to you, where he's talking about timing and talking about how you have to, you know, when you do timing, it's like this. It's not, you have, you know, you can't be sort of halfway about it. You have to lay it in there and show everybody where the downbeat is. And it's a funny video of him telling me that. But I got some great pictures of his hands too. I took pictures of his hands playing. And,
I would love to see all of that and convince him to, you know, to do the Slapstream.
I'd love to. I'd love to.
You know, lots of people would love to see him.
Yeah, I think he's probably about 82 now, somewhere in there, 80 some. And you know, he's just not as sharp as he was at one time. But you know, at one time he was a mountain of a man. He just he worked so much, but he accomplished so many things. I mean, the guy was a pilot, traveled the world with his wife, toured, you know, with Jerry Lee Lewis, all over the country, and all over the place. Yeah, I just posted a picture, I think on my Instagram, of him backing Elvis. That was a
Hawaii.
It was a Hawaiian fundraiser for the Pearl Harbor thing, and Bob playing behind him. Looked like he's playing a K bass, you know, somebody's K bass. I would imagine he flew with one back then, you know. I
posted actually an interview with Bob Moore on my website, artofslapbass.com, that was published, I think, in the early 2000s.
Yeah, with Eddie Stubbs.
Sorry?
With Eddie Stubbs asking him questions?
No, it was Peter Lurie.
Oh.
But the reason why I found out about that interview was because I was trying to find information about Joe Zinken and Bob Moore, and I was, you know, Googling all of that, and then not Googling, actually, like I got it on paper. It was a fanzine, and then I found that interview, and then that's actually how I found out about Joe Zinken. And this is the
cool.
This is the interview, and then some really cool photos. And the reason why he was talking about slap bass, and he was talking how that was never his thing, but he did. I believe this is the photo that you're talking about.
That's it. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And it's a cool interview with Chet Atkins, Johnny Cash, Roy Orbison. And you were there that night, right?
Yeah, that's the night I was there. Yeah, Ray Price. Ray Price was at the Opry, and everybody came out. That's also the night that Superman got his bass from Joe Zinken. And that
was it? Okay.
Joe's holding it there, and Bob's holding my bass.
Oh, nice.
And with steel strings on it. And that's Billy Linneman's there, and also Lightning Chance, and Buddy Harmon there to the left of Ray Price.
Huh.
There's a bigger picture of that, bigger version of that picture with Dennis Crouch, Yeah, Dennis Crouch and Kent Blanton.
I think I saw
we were all
it.
there.
I think Kent sent it to me.
Yeah.
But I bet that was a special night.
That was one of those, Nashville moments that never happen again. I don't know that Joe Zinken probably passed away not long after that, and hadn't been to the Opry in years.
Wow.
And hadn't seen so many people, And that was all Kent Blanton was the guy that was kind of got him to come out there that night.
Nice.
To see Ray.
Have you ever heard Bob Moore slapping?
No.
So the best examples for Bob Moore slapping that I found was the one that he did on a record, Said I to Shostakovich. And there's a song that was a composition, I guess, called Scherzo for Slapped Bass.
Huh.
So he's slapping through the whole thing.
Now, what's the recording again?
The track title is Said I to So the album is called Said I to Shostakovich, but the title of the song is Scherzo for Slapped Bass.
Huh.
It's pretty cool. And another one, it's with Elvis actually, and I believe that's the only slap bass solo that Elvis ever had, and it's on the song U.S. Mail.
Oh, really?
And Bob Moore is slapping.
Is there two basses on it? Is there another electric bass on that?
No, it's not that. Actually, like since you're mentioning that, he talks about it in this interview that I mentioned. The record that he did with Johnny Cash that's called Chica Boom, something like that. And Joe Zinken was playing slap, and Bob Moore was playing
the notes, the straight notes. Yeah.
Yes.
Huh.
That's when they did that record, or Chica Boom Boom, or something like that.
I know Roy Husky Jr. used to overdub a dead slap. He would play the tune and then he would overdub a dead slap sometimes on things. Just mute the strings and get the slap sound.
Oh, really? I never heard about it.
They would do that sometimes, yeah.
Do you know when he did that?
I don't know what specific recordings, but
Okay.
I've heard people ask me to do that, or I've maybe done it once or twice. I can't remember, but seems like Roy used to do that some.
Interesting, huh?
But he was a great slap bass player too.
He really was.
Yeah.
But find that recording, it's really cool. It's interesting to hear it with different kind of genre and different approach. It's on a Tupper Saucy record.
Oh, okay. Now there's a guy with an interesting story. You ever read about him?
Tupper Saucy?
Yeah.
I mean, a little bit. And actually, it was just because Bob Moore and Joe, so.
Well, he wrote a famous book about how federal taxation was illegal.
Oh, yeah, I heard about it.
The feds finally came after him. He didn't pay taxes for like 20 years, and something eventually happened to him. But he was like a mad genius. I actually asked Bob about that record before. It's been a long time, but there was a time I was looking for that record, and there's actually some YouTube videos of Tupper Saucy talking about all of this stuff. Yeah.
Interesting. And through that interview, actually, I found out about Joe Zinken. So that was the Bob Moore was saying, lots of people ask me about slap, but Joe Zinken is the guy. He was the best, and he truly was. I mean, his slapping technique was so precise, and his intonation and everything. I don't know. It's unbelievable.
Yeah, in a way, he's really kind of a forgotten and underrated bass player, but such a prominent bass player here in Nashville. I mean, he's played on tons of sessions, tons of records. And again, like I say, Bob had an amazing career, but he couldn't do it all. And so, you've got, like I say, you had Joe, and then you had Light and Chance and Ernie Newton, and then Bob, who started, basically as a teenager, working, radio shows, I asked Earl Scruggs about him. I said, was Bob Moore ever actually in the Flatt & Scruggs band? He said, no, we just used him for recording sessions and radio shows. And that was early on when they were just sort of transitioning into having, they went through a few bass players before they got Jake Tulloch in the band. And then
that was sound like I love Jake Tulloch's playing. That was something special.
One of a kind. Nobody played like him. Nobody does play like him. That's why I talk about Jerry McCoury. I say he's the last of the real blue-collar bluegrass bass players, They had that sort of raw technique and a raw sound that made it all work. And what's neat is that there's all these Flatt & Scruggs videos now. You can watch Jake Tulloch, and his technique is just almost impossible to copy. It's just so unique and different.
Yeah, he was absolutely great. Are there any upright slap bass players nowadays that you like and appreciate or follow?
One of the very best lives right here in Nashville, Joe Fick. You probably know Joe.
I know Joe, yeah.
And he's one of them guys who pulled 2 shifts down on Broadway, play 8 hours, nothing but
nice.
Hardcore slap bass. He was playing with a guy named Don Kelly here 4 nights a week. This last go round, or last time everybody was working, and Don Kelly's been here in Nashville for 40 years. Played in the clubs here. He never had a record deal or nothing. He just always played in clubs, and always had the best guitar players come through his band. And same with bass players. Everybody that ever went somewhere in the country music business as a sideman went through Don's band. And so it's kind of interesting to see Don play with Joe, because I first saw Joe with the Dempseys, which was a rockabilly band based out of Memphis.
Yeah.
And they would come over here to Nashville and play like a club date or whatever. And everybody that knew anything about him would come down and see him, And they used to do this thing I call it rock and roll call. I don't know what they called it, but they would be playing, and then they would call out the name of a rock artist or a pop rock artist. And they would do like a little snippet, 30 seconds of one of their biggest songs. And then they would just call out another one and go to the next one. And this would go on for 15 minutes. I mean, one after another. And they would, Bruce Springsteen, I'm going to just play a Bruce Springsteen piece. And then they would go to Iggy Pop, and then that. And it would just snowball. I mean, it was just amazing how they would do it. And they did a lot of stuff where they played each other's instruments at the same time, and a lot of showbiz stuff that was just off the hook. Really, really well done. But, he's amazing. There's a guy here. Oh, hell. Anyway, I never knew about putting 2 sound posts in a bass before. I was playing. I played with a country artist named Ashley Monroe for about 5 years.
Okay.
And I was the only guy probably in modern country music that was playing upright bass every night in a country band. And we were opening for all these big bands like Rascal Flat and different big country artists. And but her music was really more tradition based. And her first 2 albums were produced by Vince Gill, and they had upright bass on them. And so she had upright bass. And I always struggled with my sound on stage. I could never get the kind of volume, like to get a big bass sound on these big aluminum country show basses, or stages. And I just always struggled with it. And then Jared Manzo is the guy I'm trying to remember. And so I saw Jared play one night at this big CMA festival on a big outdoor stage, and his bass sound was just huge. And I was like, man, how do you get that sound? I've been struggling, for years trying to get my bass up like that. And he said, 2 sound posts. I said, never heard of it before. And basically, you just totally deaden the top of your bass. It's better than putting foam in the F holes, and you could get all kinds of volume. And of course, by the time I found that out, basically my country career ended not long after that. And he actually played some gigs with Ashley Monroe later on. But he doubles on electric too. So.
And that thing with 2 sound posts was like always when you used an amp, right? Not acoustic.
Well, Yeah. You couldn't do it acoustically. It would just deaden your bass completely.
Okay, because I know that there's like a couple of guys that have like a blast cult basses with two sound posts over there in Nashville.
Mm-hmm.
Mark Robertson and Jeff Farbo.
Yeah.
Those, they had that.
Yeah. See, I never knew about any of that, and I just couldn't figure out how these guys were getting this big sound. I paid $100 to have a guy make foam inserts for my F holes that fit. They sit in there. Didn't do the job. It just wouldn't work. So eventually, I was just using the Chadwick bass because it didn't have a lot of resonance to it on stage, and so it could get the volume up better. But it didn't sound as good as playing like on a big American Standard with gut strings. And now I know if I ever go back to that, I'll be able to figure out a way to get more volume out of the amp on stage and have that big sound. But it was a big frustration for me because I don't know how you do it. I mean, you play loud gigs, I'm sure, where
I have different pickups on my bass. I have three. Jason, my bass maker, he made me something that I wanted to have for a long time. So he made me my signature blast cult pickup. So I have one slap pickup right behind my fingerboard. I have one piezo on my bridge, and I have a magnetic pickup under my
fingerboard.
In the fingerboard.
Oh,
so
I had to use the magnetic for a minute, and I just didn't like the sound of it. It sounded like
in general, I don't.
Might as well have been playing electric bass.
But if I blend it, then I love it. So if I'm playing a small gig, like a jazz gig, let's say, I would put tiny bit of magnetic because I like to have that like sustain when I have a slide. So with piezo, slide is whoop.
Right.
And when you have a little bit of magnetic, it sounds like woo.
Right.
It just sounds like the way you feel like when you're doing that.
Yeah, it sounds like a P bass to me. When I had
how
one.
much you use it. It really depends how much you use it. And then if I play like arena show or like a stadium show, then I have much more magnetic, but I blend more with the slap pickup, and I push my piezo as much as I can, but that it doesn't bring any feedback.
So is that a 3 different inputs, or you have a stereo input?
It all goes to one to a preamp that it's in the tailpiece.
Okay. Wow.
So it's
a lot of hardware.
Yes, but you don't see it at all, So it's just everything is in the tailpiece. So as far as I'm concerned,
you're able to blend with that with the preamp. That's where you do the blending.
The preamp is the tailpiece is a preamp.
Okay.
So everything is in it.
Okay. Oh, it's built into the tailpiece.
Yes.
Okay. Cool.
I'm thinking if I can show it at all, but it's hard. Like let me try. Do that, but I think it's gonna be hard. So one pickup is here.
I see it.
Here.
Yep.
And that goes down. And then the other pickup are these magnetics here under each string. And I can adjust them from the back in case if one of the strings is louder or quieter. And then I have this pickup here.
Bridge pickup, piezo.
Yes, that's a piezo that I have here, but it also has a screw which helps with the feedback. So in case, again, if I'm playing a large show, then if I tighten it up a little bit more, then it has like a little less of acoustic sound. I mean, a little less of a vibration. It's still acoustic because it's piezo. And all of that goes into the tailpiece that I'm not sure that you can see at all. But
I see. It looks very cost prohibitive. You must have spent a fortune doing all that experimentation.
I love it, but it's okay. So now you can see it a little bit.
Yeah. So
it goes.
Wow. It's all
And
custom made, basically.
it is.
Well, it must have taken you a long time to devise all that. I mean, just to get to that point. A lot of research and development.
I'm not sure. Jason Jason Burns from the Blast Cult. I gave him the idea what I wanted, and then he was the one that developed it. So I knew what I wanted to have at the the very end, but I didn't know.
Right. Well, one of my good buddies here, Dave Rowe. You probably know Dave. I don't know if he's been
Yes,
on
actually,
here.
I'm going to have him in a few weeks as well.
Oh, great. He's awesome. Now he uses the pickup that goes in the top of the bridge, and they're real expensive. But the guy has to cut a bridge that goes on there, and then it sits in the top of it. It doesn't work well with high tension strings, so it's better with a gut string or a synthetic than it is, say, a steel string, because they can break this piece that's inlaid in there. Trying to remember the guy's name, but anyway, that's all he uses, and he has an amazing sound. He says, "Will not feedback. You can turn this thing up as loud as you want, it won't feedback." But I never bit the bullet and got one of those pickups.
It's one of those things that you really don't want to deal with the feedback. I mean,
yeah,
especially if you play like in a bigger show, and then you feel like a kid that brought
right
something that it's not working, and then it's
I trust me, I know I've been through it. That's just
we all do. I mean,
I've spent a fortune on amps and speakers, but I never spent as much time with the actual pickup or the design of how to make your bass, quiet your bass down enough to get it loud, And fortunately, I don't have to play too loud anymore. But getting on those big stages, you wanted to have a big full sound on stage, like an electric bass would, And we didn't use ear monitors. We were using regular stage monitors, total old school country on stage, And these guys that have the in-ear monitors, there's no sound on stage, so you wouldn't feedback at all unless it was through the house. But the subwoofers are the bane of my existence usually.
My favorite sound of yours is when you all do like one microphone, in front of the whole band. And,
yeah, one thing
bass always sounded amazing. I mean, I didn't with Del McCoury.
I never even mic'd the bass back then. When we first saw that, we saw Doyle Lawson, another great bluegrass artist. He and his band, they were the first time we ever saw anybody play on one microphone. And Del McCoury, he hates monitors. And basically, what we figured out was if we could get on one microphone, we would just take the mix out of the house person's hands and we would mix it. And so we learned how to do it on one microphone, but we never carried any external gear. We just carried the microphone. And then later on, we went to two so that we could have, we wouldn't lose as much of the backup playing. And but we learned to dance around one mic. And then one thing that I found out was that when I put a mic on the bass, because we didn't use any monitors at all, we play without monitors. The slap back, return of the bass was so prominent because it had a mic on it. It didn't sound blended in like everybody else. And so I just ditched the microphone, and we all if everybody else was playing acoustically, I would too. And that's probably where half the elements of my, right hand and arm come from is, having to play without a microphone. We just played over those two mics for ages. Now they've kind of bumped it up, and they play over about 5 mics now, I think.
Del McCoury band?
Yeah, they have like 2 up and 2 down, one for the guitar, one in the middle for the instruments, low instruments. And then the bass, Alan plays through a preamp of some sort. They have a bigger bass sound, than when I was with the band.
I haven't heard them, since you left the band, and I know that I love the sound when you were in the band. So
yeah, well, it was different, It's kind of a funny thing, It's like it's so simple, but it's so complicated for some people, Like we played. I don't know if have you ever played the Roxy in West Hollywood?
I did, yes.
Okay, so we go in there. We're playing this is not a bluegrass venue at all, but for some reason we're booked in there. So we go in, and of course we walk in with our microphones, and the sound guy in there's a complete prick. I mean, he's such an asshole. And so he comes up to us. He's like, okay, how many directs we have? I go, we don't have any directs. And I was always the guy who had to deal with the sound man because we didn't carry a sound guy with us. He goes, how many vocals? I said, we all sing. I said, but we only use one microphone. What? And I said, well, we play over 2 large diaphragm condenser microphones, and that's it. We don't use any monitor. We don't use any individual mics. There's no direct lines. I said, we just use 2 microphones. He goes, that will never work in here. And I said, I know that's probably your first inclination. I said, but let's give it a try. Let's go ahead and plug them in and set them up, and we'll see what happens. So we would set them up. We set them up in there, and this guy was just such a hard ass. And so we did the sound check. And, of course, in a big empty room, you can't push it very hard because there's nothing to absorb the sound. You know, it's just swirling around, and there's a bigger chance for feedback when you're doing the sound check. So we got through the sound check, and he seemed fairly confident that it would be okay, you know. At the end of the show, he couldn't believe it. He couldn't believe what we put through those 2 microphones and how you know, what came out of the speakers. And so he comes up to me and he's like, man, that's the most unbelievable thing I've ever seen in my life. He said, listen to this. And he had burned a CD of the show, and he starts playing it back over the sound system. And I said, hey, don't play the show. I said, we've already played the show. Don't play it again. And the next thing you know, he's like my best friend, and he wants to hang out and all this stuff. You know, his whole gruff exterior went away because we made a believer out of him. You know, like, you can actually do this. And it's funny because so many sound guys, you know, if you look at old TV shows, you don't even see a microphone. It's on a boom stand over their head. You see Frank Sinatra or Ella Fitzgerald singing with an orchestra, and they're not even holding a microphone. They sound incredible. Technology has actually ruined so many people and so many concepts of, you know, how to actually record and mic things. You know, it's unfortunate, but we had that several times where we had to make somebody a believer in what we were doing because they didn't have any concept of it. They didn't understand that at one time that's all you really had was 1 or 2 microphones, or maybe 3. You know,
that's such a cool story.
And I don't know if that guy's still at the Roxy, but he probably is.
Yeah. Well, Carolyn D says, tell it like it is. And Tom.
Well, you know, Tom Dreesen, yeah, that's Casey Dreesen's dad, a great fiddle player. Casey's a great fiddle player, and his dad plays bass. Great guy.
He wrote, Mike, it's been a wonderful afternoon. Thanks for sharing.
All right. Yeah.
So we are talking about pretty much, we covered almost all your gear, but we haven't talked about, you haven't mentioned which pickup are you using? I use the Gauge under the foot Realist pickup, the copper one. That's the one I've sort of just settled into. And my latest amp that I really like is this Fender Rumble 500. It's a 210, and it weighs 35 pounds, and it just sounds great on the upright. I really like it. And the Fender gave one to the Station Inn, and I started using it down there playing with the drummer. I have a band I play in on Monday nights called New Monday, and it's a big 6-7-piece band with Carl Jackson, who played with Glenn Campbell for about 15 years. Larry Cordell, who's an incredible singer and songwriter and bluegrass artist. And then we have a gal that's sort of the band leader and singer. Her name is Val Story. She's incredible. Doug Jernigan on steel guitar, who's a steel guitar Hall of Famer and legend. And Catherine Marks on piano. She's a top session pianist here in town. And her husband is the Kerry Marks. He's the band leader at the Grand Ole Opry. And she also tours with Reba McEntire on the road in her band. But she does a lot of sessions here in town, lots of sessions. Recorded with everybody, Merle Haggard to you name it. She's been on their records. And she also does string arrangements and those kind of things. And then Aubrey, some amazing people in Nashville.
Aubrey Haney on fiddle, who's, you know, a first call fiddle player on sessions here. He's also an instrument collector and dealer, vintage instrument guy. And Larry Adamanuik on drums. Larry played with Alison Krauss for about 8 years. And before that was with Emmylou Harris. And after the Emmylou, he was with Sam Bush for a little while. And then, and lastly would be, who's left? I think that's it. Yeah. So I started using this amp down there, playing with those guys. And then I thought, man, I'm going to go over to Fender. Fender has an office here. They have like a rep in a store where you can get custom stuff or, stuff for tours and that sort of thing. And I went over there one day and, I actually sent him an email. Well, actually, I went over there and then he said, look, I'm really busy right now. Can you send me an email with your information? So I sent him an email and I never heard back from him. So I called him on the phone and I said, I never heard back from my email. And I just want to talk to you about getting one of these amps. I said, I don't mind paying for it. I just wondered if I could get some kind of a discount as an artist or whatever. And he said, man, I thought I answered your email. He says, I'll tell you what, I'm just going to give you one. Just come over here and get it. I was like, really? Nobody ever gave me anything. So I went over and got one from him, and I love it. I use it for everything. But I've got a Tone Hammer 500, which is the I don't forget what brand that is, which I bought, and I have a big 410 cabinet with that I was using for country shows and stuff. But it doesn't sound as good for upright as it does for electric. And that's what they're using at the Grand Ole Opry. The Opry used to have these great Ampeg tube amps and stuff. And they got rid of all that tube stuff. And they got all solid state out there now. But Billy Linneman, the guy, was the house bass player there forever. He used to play on these giant Ampeg tube amps out there. And sound was incredible. And unfortunately, they got rid of all those good amps out there. But I mostly just use this little Fender 210. It gives me just about everything I need and what I do. And
there's something about those 10s, that's my favorite speaker for upright bass as well.
They're just focused, they're not too flabby. They have just the right amount of low and high blended together where they don't, not one side is accented more than the other,
Have you ever tried any 12s?
No. Mm-mm.
Couple people on the Slap
like a single speaker.
Yes, a couple people on the Slapstream mentioned that they actually love 12s. That they were they loved 10s and then they tried 12s. I never tried it. I tried 15s and I was never able to make them work nicely.
Yeah.
But it's I might try 12 one of these days, but.
It's a never ending search for the sound,
Sure. I'm happy. I play Orange and I play 810 cabinet, and I love the sound.
I had a guy that used to work on my bass. He's passed away now. His name is George Chestnut. And he made a clamp for me that clamps on the side of the bass that has a mic clip on it that holds a mic, and I can point the mic right at the F-hole of the bass. And it just clamps on the side of it. It was the first one I've ever seen, and it was kind of a prototype that he made for me. It was the very first one that he made. I still have it. I've had it for close to 30 years now. And what's nice about it is that no matter where, I never liked using a little tiny microphone on the bass. I always thought that if you're going to play an instrument this big, you need to have a real microphone in front of it, instead of a little tiny microphone. And so I would always use a regular mic on there. I like the Beyer ribbon mic is the best. The M88 microphone always sounds the best. But it points the microphone right at the F-hole so that that's where the sound comes out of the bass. So the sound guy gets all the sound he needs from that. Whereas if you put a microphone upright in the tailpiece, the sound is just going. It's not going to pick up the sound. You have to really turn it up a lot to get any gain out of it. And the chance for feedback is higher. But if you can point the microphone right at the bass, it just accomplishes all that stuff where you get the most air hitting the microphone, and the sound guy has a lot more gain to work with, seems like. And anywhere you move the bass, like if you turn, it just goes with the bass. It never changes. So it's not like getting away from a mic on a stand or that sort of thing. So I've used that for a long time too, and I use a microphone.
Which microphone are you using?
Right now I'm using a kick drum mic from it's by Audix. But any mic will do. You can do it with anything. It doesn't matter. But I like those Beyer mics. I've never been able to really afford one. But I've used them at some festivals where they have them. The M88. It's a ribbon mic, and they sound really good on there.
Is that what you use like to record as well, or?
Usually to record, just depends. Usually it's a Neumann. Typically here in town you see a U87. And sometimes I'll use two mics, KM84 for the fingerboard and a mic down low for the body of the bass. Stereo
when you're
mic.
using Slap as well, or
yeah,
or anything.
Yeah, that's pretty much typically how it is. It just depends. A lot of these guys, these younger guys that have studios, they're using really new microphones, like new versions of old microphones.
Mm-hmm.
You know, there's copies of everything now. MXL and Pelosi is another mic. And so I've seen a lot of different new microphones too. But typically it's a Neumann and a KM84.
I love using Neumanns. I've been using for my bass actually Mojave. This one.
Oh yeah, right. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. They're the same as Royer. Just
right.
I mean, they're made in the same factory. They're like sister companies.
Yeah.
And this one's Mojave too. They actually reached out to me a few days ago. We'll send you another one. We have a better one for podcasts.
Like, good.
Sure. All right. Because I'm using this one usually for my slap.
Okay.
And without the foam, but like
do you use it on stage or just on stage or just
never
on studio?
No.
Okay.
On stage I always use pickups.
Okay.
Yeah, on stage I never used mic. Like never.
You know, I love this record, Oscar Peterson, We Play Requests. I don't know if you ever heard that. Or Oscar Peterson Trio plays requests.
With Ray Brown?
With Ray Brown, Ed Thigpen. It's a live album. And to me, that's like the penultimate bass sound. If I could just get that sound, that's all I'd ever dream of having, you know.
Wow.
It's just the sound of his bass on there is so great. And back then he was still playing gut strings before he went to the steel strings and an amp. Later in his career, it seemed like he played more with an amp. Seemed like, I don't know. I never saw him in person. I was going to see him the year that he passed away. I had him on my list to go see him because I try to go see all these legendary guys, you know, before they can't. It doesn't matter who they are. I want to go see him before they're gone, you know. And he was on my list for sure, and then he ended up passing away before the show that I was going to be able to go see him at.
Do you play much jazz?
Not really, no. I mean, I can hack my way through some swing tunes or whatever that I know the changes to, but I'm not a bona fide jazz player, you know, not really schooled in any of that kind of real harmony. Like I can't play the colors to chords, you know, flat 5 and flat 9 chords and those sort of things to play it right, you know. But, you know, I also know that a lot of times, a lot of that music is written out for the bass players. Like I would say Joe Comfort, you know, that played on a lot of Frank Sinatra records. I think that, you know, some of those parts were written out, you know, in the orchestrations of the arrangements and stuff.
And do you read?
No.
No, okay. So
I should be by now.
So your studio work is, you know, always by ear?
Always by ear with a Nashville, you know, chord chart system.
Yeah, okay. So that's something that I learned in US. I didn't know. I went to school like for classical music and for jazz back home, but you know I never knew about Nashville system until I got here.
Right. Well, the main thing about it is that it allows you to play in any key.
Yeah.
You know, and if you teach people the bass, you know, when you're teaching lessons and you teach them this formation here and how chords relate and how you can just move it over to one string here and hold another key or another spot, everything still relates the same. And that's where the Nashville chord system really is handy, because once you know where your tonal center is, everything relates around that, you know, and it makes it really simple. Unless you're like yourself, maybe totally schooled and it's too simple. It's just overly simplified in some ways, you know.
One thing that I think it's very useful. One thing that I never understood, like what would happen like if you're playing a song that changes keys often. So are you writing one, like for example, for each new key?
Well, yeah. Usually, what they do is it'll go to the mod chord, whatever the chord is. So, say you're going up a whole step, you would write to a 6 if you're going to the 5 of the next key, and then it would say mod half step, and then you're back into the new key is the 1 after that.
Okay. So if you're playing a song like Giant Steps, like Coltrane, for example, and then it changes like every bar, so then it would be
I would hate to see
like every bar.
I would hate to see that chart. I mean, that song basically goes around every key, right? Basically, it plays in every key. So
it's crazy. So I'm thinking. I mean, this is extreme example, but I was like, I always wondered, like, okay, so if it's a great system for for most of the country music, I guess.
Yeah,
what happens like if you mix it up?
I think typically you just you signify the chord that is the modulation chord, and then when you mod to the next key, you make a notation of the next key. And then that starts as a new 1 chord. Sure. Or you could actually go back to the top and use the same chart if it's the same thing. But it just depends upon the song, of course. But typically that's how I've seen it done. It just depends,
Next question, and I think it's like you're the perfect guy like to ask that since you're in Nashville. How do you get a gig? What would be your advice like for people that want to be and stay busy in Nashville? How should they get gigs or tour, as well?
You'll never get a gig by staying at home. You have to be present to win, is what I always say. You have to get out there. You got to go hear a lot of music. And one of the things about Nashville is that we have world-class music of every kind here. There's great rock bands, there's great songwriters, there's great bluegrass, there's great Americana and indie rock, all kinds. There's jazz, all that stuff's here. And it all emanates from certain clubs and places. And so you have to kind of find your way around and find where you fit in best with the people and the music that you're really kind of trying to get involved with. And, we have Lower Broadway, which is a row of clubs that plays mostly country music of the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s and to 2000s. And different clubs have different sensibilities. So like we have Robert's Western World, which is where BR 549 emanated from. And they're known for traditional country music. You're not going to hear any Garth Brooks songs in there or anything like that. Nothing against Garth or anything like that. It's just that they concentrate on vintage country music in there. And so that's a good hang in there if that's what you want to play, especially if you're an upright player. But you got to get to know people. You just have to introduce yourself, and you just have to weave yourself into the fabric of the musicians. And if you get a chance to sit in, or you get a chance to play a gig with somebody, then everything emanates from that. You just have to get started. You have to be somewhere to where you have that opportunity to not only let somebody hear you, but to meet somebody. And Nashville is all these little circles of people that work together. There's rhythm sections, and there's songwriters, and there's lead players, and they all kind of know each other. And there's guys that are available, and then there's guys that aren't available, and maybe you'll get a call. But you have to kind of just insert yourself in the scene and not be too bashful, but not be too forceful either. I have a really good friend, Guthrie Trapp, who's one of the top Telecaster guys here in town. And when he first moved to Nashville, he would go down to Roberts and see the Don Kelly band. And Don Kelly always had the best Telecaster players in town. And all the newest, hottest players played in his band. Started out with Brent Mason back in the 80s, played with him, Red Volkart, Johnny Highland, just a ton of great players. And Guthrie would go down there, and he kind of had to earn, because Don doesn't really let anybody sit in, because Don's got a set sort of format that he would do his show, and you'd have to earn you'd have to earn a place up there to sit in with him. Like if he knew that it wasn't going to make him look or sound bad, then you could get up and do one or two, and that's what he ended up doing. And then he became the next guitar player for Don Kelly, and he played for him for 4 years down there, 4 nights a week, every night. And those are the kind of gigs that are really great, because you really get your chops together You know, you're covering so much material, a big gamut of sort of repertoire, which is really important, is having a lot of repertoire under your belt. And that's a hard thing to develop when you're just practicing at home. You have to get out and play songs. You got to go out and play requests, and you got to be listening all the time. So if you play a gig and you go, God, I got to figure out what that song is. You know, for instance, I sit in with this band every once in a while, and they do some stuff in some odd keys, like Don't It Make My Brown Eyes Blue in F sharp. And F sharp's an impossibly difficult key to play in on the bass because there's no open strings. There's no shortcuts. But, you know, after that experience, you got to go home and you go, I've got to learn this song and make sure I can play it in 2 or 3 different keys. And so you do that, and you kind of develop that repertoire. And so that somebody calls a song and they call it in some odd key, you just go to it and be able to play it. And again, it's all knowing those relationships and how the chords and keys work. But that's a big thing. It's just getting the repertoire under your belt and listening all the time. You got to be listening. You got to go out and hear bands and see what they're playing. And then you also got to hear what people are requesting and kind of got to be on it, you know, and know what's happening. It's different from being in a band and starting from scratch and just developing your own sound and material. Getting a job as a sideman is really, you know, it's a whole other ball game. It's being versatile and being able to be light on your feet. You know, when somebody calls a tune that you don't even know, and they just give you the key and they say 15-11, here we go, and they count it off. You know, you don't want to stick out too much. You want to be supportive of what's happening, and it's really key. It takes a while. Nothing happens in this town overnight. I tell a lot of people, you know, a lot of people get discouraged early on, and you can't be afraid to actually have to work for a living and take a job until your music career can kind of pick up. But people come and go from this town. My buddy Guthrie, for example, when he was working with Don Kelly, Patty Loveless came. Somebody said, "You got to come down and hear this guitar player down on Broadway. He's the guy. He's the next guy." Patty Loveless went down there and hired him right off the stage, basically, for her band, for her touring band, and he was with Patty for 4 or 5 years too. So it just kind of stair steps up from that, you know, and you'll wind up playing with some guys that aren't that great, but they get gigs and they pay, and you meet people, and, you know, if this is what you want to do and it's what you love, you got to get in it and play all you can. And it takes a while before you can kind of filter out the things that you don't want to do. But in the beginning, you got to do everything. You know, you have to take all the convention gigs and the backyard parties and the club dates and the, you know, ride in a van and do all that stuff. I mean, it's all part of it, but you got to start by showing up and getting out there and sort of finding your way through the town and this place that's just full of musicians, you know. And it's also very important not to compare yourself to anybody else, you know, really figure out what your strengths are and concentrate on using those to your advantage, and don't go around downplaying your strengths while you're talking about all the things that you can't do. Let somebody else figure out what that is. If you know what your strengths are, concentrate on that and use that to propel you to the next thing, whatever it is, you know.
So what is the goal? What is the next step? Is the goal like to be busy like 7 nights a week, or it's the goal to go on tour?
For a musician, the goal is to make more and work less.
But does that mean like join like a touring band, or it means like get into studio circle?
You know,
or
it all depends. You know, being in a studio is a whole nother ball of wax than it is being in a touring band. If it's a country band, you know, like I was in a country band, what we were doing was opening shows for big country acts. So that's 20 to 25 minutes on stage. That's it. That's 6 to 8 songs, period. That's all you play every night. Now you're riding in a nice, you know, cush tour bus, and you're playing on the big stages, but you're also playing for people that are getting to their seats or still in line getting a beer to get to their seats. And they say, you know, if you're working for a young artist, a new artist, that it's real easy to come back losing all your chops, knowing 8 songs really well, and being either a drug addict or an alcoholic by the end of it, you know, end of the season. It's real simple to get complacent, you know. It's a lot more challenging to play 4 hours in a bar down on Broadway where you're playing nonstop, no break for 4 hours, and you're playing, you know, 60 to 80 songs in one night. That is really what builds your character as far as your playing and your repertoire and just your knowledge and your bass, broadening your bass out. But there are people that get very lucky. You know, they do something really well and they get on a touring band. And if that's what you want to do, you want to tour, you just have to work your way up from, you know, the car to the van to the bus. And that's all stature, you know, and all it has to do with the, you know, what level of the business you want to be in. Then there's a whole other side of this business that's, you know, people like Jason Isbell or Sturgill Simpson or these people that, you know, you don't hear them on the radio at all, but they're very prominent, have huge fan base through social media and that kind of thing, and are very successful. So there's a commercial music here. There's a lot of commercial music here. There's a ton of studio work. You know, again, studio work is you got to be very creative. You have to forget what you just did yesterday and bring something new today. And being versatile, you know, and having you got to have a sound. You really have to have a good sound, and that's your equipment and your instruments and your hands and heart. You know, it all has to come together there in the studio because you don't hide anything in there. You know, it's like being in front of a camera. Basically, there's no hiding. Whereas if you're on stage and you're playing a club or you're playing a concert or whatever, you can duck out and here and there, or you can, you know, cover a flub or whatever. But it's not the same in the studio, and they don't like to waste any time here. You know, there's not a lot of chit chatting around. It's just, especially if it's a union session, you know, you try to get 3 or 4 in one session. It's not allowed lounging around. You know, you have to really concentrate and bring your A game every time. Otherwise, they're going to call somebody else. It's pretty simple. Now,
and there's not a shortage of bass players in Nashville.
Not now, but you know, part of the pandemic is there's been a bit of a purge in this town where a lot of musicians have gone back to their hometowns, just because they can't make it here, so they go back home where they can, you know, work a day job, and hopefully we can work the music from their place, you know, from wherever they live. You know, it's kind of funny in Bluegrass, like Southwest Airlines is I call it the Bluegrass Airlines. It's really easy to fly pretty much anywhere on Southwest, and it's very affordable. And it's kind of become a taxi service for the bluegrass industry in a way, because you could play in New Hampshire one night and you could play in Southern California the next night. And all you got to do is take a 4-hour plane ride across the country the same day of the show. And, you know, bluegrass bands, they carry their instruments with them. You know, they don't carry a tractor trailer full of production and, you know, don't have to necessarily follow a tour schedule or tour routing. You can cross the country every weekend and go different places. And so it's really opened up a lot of opportunity as a musician to play just about anywhere in the country on a weekend. You could play 2 or 3 different states by just flying around on Southwest. So hopefully that'll come back. But in the country world, you know, again, you know, it's just, you got to haul a lot of equipment. There's a lot that it's involved in it. But you know, it's nice when you get to the top. You know, I did one tour with Vince Gill where we worked 40 shows, and it was basically an intimate evening with Vince Gill, and he sang all of his hit songs and told the stories behind writing them. And then he had his piano player Pete Wasner and his drummer Billy Thomas, who just played a cajon, and then he had me on upright bass, and he played electric and acoustic guitars. And we did 10-day runs for 4 months. Each month we did a different 10-day run. One was to the Northeast, one was to the Midwest, one was the Southeast, and then we did the West Coast. And that was a bus for the band. There's just 4 of us, basically, 5 of us, plus a tour manager. Then there's a crew bus, and that's all of his sound guys and lighting guys and whatever, you know. That's 10 people over there. And a tractor trailer to haul all the monitors and lighting rig and all that stuff, you know. That's at a very high level. You know, we can only hope to get there. And it's nice to have a taste of that every once in a while, but that's not where I live. You know, as I tell people, I've spent half my life looking out a window, getting somewhere or getting back from there, you know, whether it's flying or riding in a car, van, bus, whatever, you know, that's where the time is spent is riding and getting where you got to go. The fun part is
the job. That's why we're getting paid for it. Like,
that's right.
We're not getting paid like to play.
The fun part is playing the music, but you'll never get all that time back. You know, you realize,
Yeah.
God, I've been sitting for half my life, sitting for hours, you know. But, you know, there's a lot of reward in it too. Like we condense, you know, a lot of people, they need schedule, they need structure in their life. They need to know that they're going to go to work from 9 to 5 every day. This is what I'm getting paid. This is how long I'm going to do this, and blah, blah, blah. A lot of people need that. The music business, it doesn't follow any structure at all, unless you're with an artist that has loyalty to the musicians in their band and will keep them on and keep them paid and keep them fed to, you know, through the lean times. The hardest part is getting through these lean times like this, you know. Of course, who knew this would ever happen? I've had tours canceled at the last minute and gigs and trips and all that kind of stuff, but nothing like what's happening here, you know. But you have to be ready for that. You know, that's a whole other side of it, is the psychology of dealing with the volatility of the music business, and it changes on a daily basis. Somebody could just fire you and hire somebody else for whatever reason, you know, and you have to be able to absorb that, you know, and move on. It's not for everybody at that level. You have to really, really love it, and I love it. I've been playing music since I was 14 years old, and the very first time I went to a bluegrass festival, I realized this is all I ever really wanted to do. You know, my life changed at that point. Whereas a lot of people that are teenagers, you know, they don't know what they want to do. They don't know what direction they're going to go. Sometimes they go to college for a couple of years. They still don't have it figured out, you know. But I knew kind of from the beginning what I wanted to do when I started playing music, that this was something that I wanted to do. And I love people. I love traveling. And I love music, you know, it's my thing. So it's worked out good. And I've been able to stay here in Nashville now I've been here 31 years. And, you know, a lot of ups and downs, but you have to be able to roll with it. And, you know, sometimes it's not easy for the other people in your life. You know, if you're married or have a family, you're gone a lot, and everybody has a sacrifice. You know, it's a big sacrifice for everybody to have that time. But like I say, sometimes you condense a 40-hour week of work into 2 days. You know, you get on a plane Friday, come home Sunday night, and you don't leave again until next Friday. So you're home, you know. And so in some ways you get a lot more free time, unless you're on an actual tour where you're playing, you know, night after night after night, which I don't do a lot of that stuff anymore. Pretty much everything I do is on the weekends, you know, unless it's here in town.
I think it's about a balance, you know, like balance and surrounding yourself with people that actually understand that this is not just fun. It is fun, but it's not just fun.
Yeah.
There's lots of, you know.
Well, if it wasn't fun, if it wasn't fun, we wouldn't do it, you know. And that's what as Jack Clemens said, we're in the fun business. That's what, and if we're not having fun, we're not doing our job, you know. And so, but a lot of people, you know, you're not supposed to have that much fun. You're having more fun than we are at home, you know, that kind of thing. So it's a tough thing to balance out and find the right people to surround yourself with.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
You know, it's
one thing that we haven't mentioned, and I wanted to talk to you about it. Like, how many times have you been voted the best bluegrass bass player of the year?
At the International Bluegrass Awards, I've been awarded 5 times, and all of that was while I was with the Del McCoury band. So
okay.
That was kind of a vehicle for getting those, because I was in a prominent band and out there a lot. And I've been nominated every year since then, this year included, but I haven't won in 15 years. But I'm nominated again this year. And I'm always thankful for it, because it just means that people are seeing my name out there, and it's like, I'm still working, you know.
And so it's important to be a part of the prominent band, like, in order like to get.
It can't hurt. You know, in our case of the Del McCoury band, we were allowed to contribute to the band and the personality of the band. It wasn't just a bunch of guys quietly standing behind one artist. I mean, we were that and more. And he gave us an opportunity to come out front and sing a song or be part of the show. Mm-hmm. And I was never told how to play or what to play because he wanted you to bring something to his music. Now, you have to learn all the repertoire. You have to learn the history and know the songs. And if somebody calls out a song he recorded 40 years ago, you got to know it. You know, you have to absorb all of that information and material and really go into the deep dive and learn that stuff inside out and be ready for it at any gig that you might play. But at the same time, he allowed us to bring something forward. And so individually in this band that was somebody else's band, you know, we all had our fans. We all had people that followed us and enjoyed our music and enjoyed our contributions to it. And that doesn't come along very often. You know, that's why I say this. They've only had one personnel change in 28 years, and that was bass players. So
that's crazy. But it's so cool.
Well, you know, not everybody's fortunate to have that kind of work situation. You know, that it's kind of special. You know, a lot of people don't understand. How many bass players
did they have in a band?
Huh?
How many bass players did they have in a band?
What do you mean by that?
Del McCoury.
Over the years?
Yeah.
Well, they had a lot more before I came along.
Okay.
I mean, you know, they would have a different bass player every 5 years or whatever, you know.
Oh, okay.
You know, bluegrass is it's a tough business. You know, it's a lot of like I say, a lot of travel time back then. You know, Del was always what you consider a well-known regional act before he moved to Nashville and became sort of I mean, he worked across the country before he came to Nashville, but it was when he got to Nashville, he was able to just really immerse himself full-time into playing all kinds of venues and that sort of thing, you know. So it really took the band to another level. And we had a lot of great collaborations, like the thing with Steve Earle got us out in front of a bunch of new people that didn't really know bluegrass. And also, you know, along the time that Jerry Garcia died, a lot of people from the Grateful Dead world came into bluegrass because Jerry Garcia had a connection to bluegrass through Old and in the Way, and David Grisman and that sort of thing, and Peter Rowan. And so a lot of that scene came in because it was very accessible, especially like the taper guys, tape scene, because they found it very easy to come in and tape shows and record because everybody was like, yeah, sure, go ahead. And then that kind of changed where people wanted less of those recordings. There's a long tradition of live recordings in bluegrass. Everybody has a collection of live tapes and stuff, you know, that they like to collect. And it got a little dicey there for a while where so many people were coming in and recording that. And, you know, it's kind of a predecessor to the sort of the end of the CD business, you know, and selling CDs and that sort of thing. I know some bands, they didn't quit selling their records on the road. They just quit carrying them. They just make T-shirts, you know, what they call soft goods.
Yeah.
They'll make a custom T-shirt every 3 months and then change it every 3 months. So it becomes collectible and a different way to make money in the merchandise side of things. I never made a solo record, but if I had, I would have been, you know, they would have let me sell at the record table and that sort of thing, and would have advertised that from the stage and that sort of thing. But I never felt compelled to do that. But
it's never too late.
You're right.
Do you write songs?
No, I work with some great songwriters here in town. I work with a guy named Shawn Camp. He's one of the best, and he fronts a bluegrass band called the Earls of Leicester with Jerry Douglas.
Uh-huh.
And but he's also written like 7 #1 songs.
Wow.
And but he hung out with Guy Clark a lot, wrote a lot of songs with Guy Clark, who's really the poet laureate of Texas songwriting. And so he did really develop. He's been around all the, you know, he's like me. He likes old music and old artists, and he learned from all the, you know, all the old school guys here in Nashville. Got to be around all of them, you know. And now he mentors young songwriters and stuff. So
that's great. That's the cool thing about Nashville. From all these band leaders that you worked with, like, what was their opinion in general about slap bass? Was there anybody opinionated about it, or?
No, I think that anybody that would have hired me would know that I might incorporate some of that. So I never heard anybody say, don't do that.
Okay.
And like I say, I try to weave it in a tasteful way without trying to get in anybody else's way, and use it as an accent more than in sort of a main sound, I guess.
That makes sense. I mean, have you ever heard about that story that Bill Monroe was cutting like fingerboards, like the bottom of the fingerboard, that he was not allowing his bass players like to play slap?
No, but there's a picture. I've seen a photograph of Bessie Lee, who was his bass playing girlfriend. She's playing a bass, and there's no lower fingerboard at all. It's like broke off. And I've never asked anybody about that. I need to ask Dell maybe if he remembered that fingerboard being broken off. I don't know. That sounds kind of like a myth to me. I don't know if that's true.
I heard it like quite a few times, but I was never able to confirm it for sure.
Yeah, I don't know about that. He was very in tune with his music, so it's very possible. I mean, it's possible, but
his first recordings, the ones that I mentioned from that hotel, they had slap. So
yeah.
I'm like thinking like, the first original Bluegrass recordings had slap. So why it's now no in the style?
Well, I think of it more as a primitive style of playing, in those days. Like that's how they just played, because it was primitive and raw, As the music got more defined and refined later on, he might have wanted less of that to compete with what he was doing,
I can see that. I mean, especially since in jazz world, like 1939 is kind of cut-off point, like for slap. Once Jimmy Blanton joined Duke Ellington, they were like nobody was slapping all of a sudden in jazz.
Right. Well, the technology may have helped that too. Like they had better sound, maybe a little bit better sound system or recording process, and maybe just a different sort of attack on stage. Like it just didn't have that same rawness to it, like early hot jazz would have had. But it's hard to know. Be nice to go back and find that stuff out in person.
What would be, as far as your opinion, what would be the most essential slap bass recordings? Yeah, what would be the most essential slap bass recordings?
Boy, I don't know. Any great rockabilly, I guess. I don't know. I'm not a aficionado on that type of music, but all of the well-known greats, of course. From Elvis Presley records to early, Bill Monroe Bluegrass records to.
How about Flat and Scruggs with Jake Tulloch?
I did it again. Sorry.
Yeah. Luckily, it's not an earthquake.
I gotta plug my power in here. Anyway, but I don't know. It's I would say just suggest going to your website. You seem to have all of the info.
I'm trying to collect, but there's always something pops up as like, oh yeah, there's this recording from 47. They were doing this cool thing, whatever. I mean, one of as far as Bluegrass, I would definitely say Flat and Scruggs with Jake Tulloch.
Yes,
or those
definitely.
recordings, or George.
Any of the 50s stuff is like that. The 50s Bluegrass, with John Palmer with Don Reno, George Shuffler with the Stanley Brothers. Of course, he did more walking bass than he did slap bass. And then, of course, Jake Tulloch and
Zinken.
And Joe Zinken, But, Joe didn't really play in any bluegrass bands that I know of, other than, a session or whatever he might have done.
As far as what would be your advice about mistakes that you did, and what would be your advice to new bass players that want to kind of go and follow the path that you did?
Well, you know, I'm getting all my electronics here. Back up after my earthquake.
All right.
Am I on? Can you hear me? Okay.
Oh,
I
yeah,
got this. I got this little splitter thing. It gives me power and headphones at the same time.
Oh, cool.
You know, everybody's situation is different. I mean, it's just hard to say this is right or this is wrong. You know, the most important things are, of course, is having a good attitude. Don't complain a lot. It's really easy to complain. You know, look for the silver linings in almost every disaster out there. And avoid being around toxic people. You know, that's another thing, because that makes the music business unenjoyable when you're around that kind of thing. And you have to watch out for the pitfalls. You know, drugs and alcohol are big pitfalls in the music business. Doesn't matter what kind of music you're playing. Boredom is a terrible thing. But most importantly, I think you just have to really listen to a lot of music and stay up on things, and always be building your repertoire. Find new experiences. You know, sometimes it's not a matter of chasing music down. Sometimes it's a matter of letting the music come to you. And I can say that in my case, like when I left the Del McCoury band, you know, I quit the band, and I thought, well, I'm just going to move on to a different band. And I realized right away that I wasn't ever going to have this experience again, you know, playing with this level of musicianship and really making some iconic music, you know, because it's really hard to find yourself with somebody who's a true artist like Del McCoury, who's one of the great bluegrass song interpreters that there are. You just don't run across people like that every day in this business. So once I came to that realization, you know, I thought, well, I'm just going to hang out and let the music come to me. So I got a day job, and I worked at Home Depot for about 2 years. And then slowly people started calling and things started happening. And next thing you know, I found myself in these totally new and different musical situations. And it really helped me grow as a bass player, grow out of where I had been, you know, and broaden my playing and my abilities and my sensibilities. And, you know, the next thing I know, I'm playing with drummers all the time. I'm out of the bluegrass world, and I'm listening to a bunch of different kinds of music, especially electric bass players, and trying to adapt that to my playing on the upright. And just, you know, all that stuff kind of happened organically. It wasn't anything I was chasing after, but I was ready to react to it as it came to me, you know. And that's what's important, you know. Sometimes it's easier, you know. John Hartford used to say, sometimes the best way to win a race is not get in it at all.
Do you play much electric bass at all?
Nobody ever calls me to play electric bass. I have 2 electric basses. I have one of those Epiphone Jack Cassidy models. And then I have a P bass. But nobody's ever called me to play electric bass. I don't think ever in my career. And that's because there's so many other choices in this town. You know, there's so many electric bass players and really good ones.
I recorded electric on, I think, 1 or 2 songs in my career.
Yeah.
The last time was 20 years ago or something.
Well, that's what happens when you for something, you know?
Yeah, I guess so.
And,
all right, so we're getting very close to the end. You see, like Kim is even concerned here. He's asking you, Mike, are you going to break the record for longest Slapstream interview?
I can talk.
But Carolyn is assuring him you got the record for now, Kim.
All right.
And he replied, yeah, I would hate to part with my trophy. So I want to tell our audience, if you have any other questions for Mike, now is the time. We're close to the end. It's over 3 hours again.
Wow. You know, hey,
flies.
Bass is a big subject, especially upright bass.
Exactly. And you know, one thing that I'm stoked about is, like, I would not have an opportunity to do this if it was normal time, not new normal. because we would always be, somebody would be on the road. I would be on the road. So
Yeah. Well, I
like,
actually have a gig tonight. I have to run sound at the Station Inn tonight for their live stream.
oh, that's
So
cool. Are you playing much like on, these days live?
just a little bit,
Just a little bit.
here and there. I've done some sessions. I played Tuesday night. We had they have a Bill Monroe mandolin camp here every year that's run by a guy named Mike Compton, who used to be in the Nashville Bluegrass Band. He's probably the foremost Monroe style mandolin player that there is out there. He doesn't exactly sound 100% like Bill Monroe because he's kind of taken that and made it a very original style that he's developed based on the Bill Monroe style of mandolin playing. Anyway, they have a music camp every year, and it starts with a concert by all the instructors. And so this year they had to go virtual like everybody else, and we ended up doing a concert at Station Inn, which I played bass for, and it was an hour and a half of one Bill Monroe song after another, and I was wore out at the end of that. I had to do a session the next 2 days, and I haven't had calluses. My calluses washed off, basically back in May. I was mostly just sitting around the house playing guitar, and then my calluses went away. I used to have one on this pinky that, it was just, it was like this big giant pad on there. Now it's about half the size that it was. But anyway, my hands are coming back slowly. It's good to kind of ease back into it instead of.
Yeah. So it's good that they're opening up in stages, huh?
Yeah. And now there's a big rift downtown because apparently the mayor tried to, they didn't have a lot of COVID cases in these bars, but they shut everybody down. Mm-hmm. And now they found these emails and communications about, let's keep this under wraps and all this kind of, I don't know what's going on, but they did more than they needed to do apparently. But
oh, wow.
But who knew? They're all operating from the great unknown on all this stuff.
We still don't know anything.
Yeah.
It's just
this guy I listen to sometimes, Scott Adams, he said, I can tell you one thing. He said, all the data is wrong. He said, that's the way we approach everything. All the data is wrong on everything. Doesn't matter what it is. So I don't know. I think we're going to be all right.
Yeah, I mean, we'll survive. It's, worse things happen to the planet. Maybe not in our lifetime, but even in our lifetime.
Yeah.
All right. I have one more question for you.
Okay.
What still inspires you to do what you do?
Well, I love it. I love music and I really like playing in a good band and I like playing behind a great singer. And I'm just very fortunate that I get to play with some of the very best singers that, are in this town. And that's what I really enjoy doing. And I feel like I can't really do that anywhere else. If I were to move to Austin or if I was to move to Los Angeles, I just I'd be starting all over again. I've been here for 30 years. And I just love this town, and I love the musicians that are here, and I love the history of it. And that's what really keeps me going, is that I'm where I think I need to be. And I think I'm where it suits me best for musically speaking, And I could, I've thought about living other places, and then I think, well, that's I have to, I wouldn't be able to do what I do. And get a call from somebody today to say, can you do this tomorrow? Which is one thing that's really good here in Nashville, is that there's things happening all the time. There's gigs and there's recordings and there's all kinds of things. And so I end up getting, as I tell people, I'm good on short notice. I may not be perfect, but I can usually, pull it together pretty quick. And so that affords me a lot of work. And not everybody, like I say, has that opportunity in another place. So I really don't think I could do this anywhere else. And that's really the key to it all, is just being able to weather through these tough times. I always tell people, I said, you have to, number one, save your money. Number two, especially if you make any money, if you make a decent paycheck once in a while, save what you can of it. And number two, you have to have a home. You have to have a place where you can live through these tough times. And you're going to have tough times. You're going to have a bad weekend. You're going to have a bad week. You're going to have a bad month. And this year we're having a bad year, which is, completely unusual and unprecedented. But you got to figure out a way to weather the storm. And I tell people, I said, I plan on dying here with my boots on. I'm not going anywhere. So try to find the silver lining in it. And I think some good things will come out of it, Like I made this record with Sturgill Simpson, and I think that I'll probably be touring with him at least for another year or two when this record comes out. I'm doing a lot of TV stuff and that kind of thing. I got my fingers crossed anyway. So keep an eye out for that. It's a double album of Sturgill Simpson's Bluegrass, or a Bluegrass double album of Sturgill Simpson's back catalog done in a Bluegrass style. So, this business is always on to the next thing. What's next? What are we going to do next? What's going to happen? I had a great run with the Del McCoury band, 13 years. But after I left there, I thought, well, I don't want to attach myself to a moving ship again. I want to be a little bit more lighter on my feet and kind of be able to say no or be able to say yes to things that I just want to do, because may not pay that good, but I want to play this music, or I want to be around these people. And that's what I'm always searching for is, people say, you play with everybody. I say, no, I'll play with anybody. There's a big difference. So,
They usually say, like, for musicians, there are three things. Either it's a good music, good hang, or good money. So you have to have two out of these three.
Yeah. Sometimes just one.
Yeah. Well, if you're, but like, as long as you have two, I think you're good to go.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, I just don't, that's it exactly. Is I try to do what I like to do, and I'm been here long enough that, I look at the empty calendar and I go, oh my God, how am I going to make it? And the next thing you know, the phone rings and something happens. And, and I have a lot of friends here too, like Mark Fain, who you've had on your thing before, or it was on the Austin bass hang with us. He throws me work. He does stuff that he can't do, and he'll say, hey, can you go do this weekend with these guys, And so I've kind of developed these little sub gigs where I go and substitute for people. And that works out pretty good too, because every once in a while when you don't have anything and all of a sudden somebody calls and said, hey, can you fill in this weekend? And it's like, yeah, so it's all about that kind of stuff. You have to have a little network, and as I often say, network equals net worth.
I remember that. I'm not sure if it's too much. Like, is there any way that we hear you like for another minute slapping, or
Sure.
it's too much? All right. Thanks so much.
Let me unplug this. Get free of this thing.
You don't play that many solos, so I want to hear them as many as possible. And this is Slapstream live from Slapsville, so people definitely appreciate some good slapping. Which bass are you going to be using now?
I'll get out the old K bass here.
All right.
There's the end of Earl Scruggs instrumental called Ground Speed, and then they always end it like this. Something like that. Jake Tulloch. Can't even hit it. Anyway. I don't know what to play. I have to have some sort of, roadmap of some kind. You probably can't see my right hand.
How about that Steve Earle solo that you were doing?
Steve Earle solo?
The one that you recorded on Texas Eagle.
Is there a solo on there?
You played some slap on it.
I don't know. At the very beginning of that song, he says, He says MIKEY. Got to have your hat on, boy, if you're going to play in this band or something like that. And I was putting my headphones on. That's why he started saying that. And he started singing at the Mickey Mouse Club, whatever. And I was just putting my headphones on. But, that's all just slapped to that whole thing, like a train beat. And, I always tell people you can accent more or less of the slap in the note if you want. So. I don't know.
Thanks so much. It seems that people are not aware that even with slap, they can use lots of dynamics.
Yeah, right.
Mike, thanks so much for being a guest of the, I believe, 15th episode of the Slapstream.
All right.
Live from
Thank
Slapsville.
you, Djordje. I appreciate the invite. I don't do a lot of these things, but good luck in your move and everything. I hope everything works out.
Thank you. And
are you going back
everything
to
you do is great.
Are you going to Serbia? Is that right?
I'm debating, like what's going to happen, so we'll see, it's still, I'm thinking I have a few plans. So we'll see what's going
See what works out.
What's going to happen. Yeah.
I've never
now we don't have any plans, any tours, anything. So I'm kind of pretty much right now focused only on this.
Yeah, me too. That's really why I'm glad to be in Nashville, because what little bit there is to do here is just trickling down, a little bit. So
yes,
if I was anywhere else, it'd be nothing happening, And I know California's got a lot more restriction than we have. So
it's really weird in California now. But it is what it is. We'll survive. Get stronger.
We will survive. Yeah, I've never been to Eastern Europe at all. I'd love to come over there sometime and
it should
check it out. I'm a big gypsy music fan. I love Django Reinhardt music and all that kind of stuff.
Oh, cool.
And
we have lots of Gypsy Romani music in the Balkans as well, especially if you're into that, Romania and Serbia, Bulgaria, all time signatures, really cool stuff.
Yep. I'd love to come check it out.
You should. All right. Thanks a lot, man. And I can't wait to see you play again somewhere.
Thanks for everybody for joining us. And thanks for having me. And come see us in Nashville, Tennessee, Music City, USA.
Exactly.
And, you can usually find me at the Station Inn on any given night of the week, mostly on Mondays, but that's kind of my hometown hang and where most of the music that I play and hang out and musicians I hang around with are there, among a few other places. But check out the Station Inn here in Nashville.
Definitely.
Oh, and by the way, they have their own streaming service now. It's called stationintv.com. And you can watch their shows free right now. They show them on Facebook Live. They simulcast it on Facebook Live on their Facebook page. And then, but they have a subscription service. It's $9 a month, and you can watch any of the archived shows at the Station Inn from the last 2 years, pretty much on there. So.
And what's the best way to find that, on their website or Facebook?
You can find it off the Station Inn website, which is just stationin.com. But then they have a separate site for their subscription service, which is stationintv.com, which is their live stream channel.
Okay.
And, but when they do a show, they'll do the show live on their Facebook page, simulcast it there, and you can usually watch it on that archived on there as well for free. So
that's cool. All right, I'll check that out. I would recommend for our viewers to do that. We got a few more comments from Charlie.
Charlie, you're late.
Yeah. What's up, brother? From Tom Source. Very cool. Good
Tom
story.
Towers,
Thanks.
I went to school with him 30-some years ago, 35 years ago.
All right, some friends of yours.
Yeah.
Diego says, a lovely man and a great interview.
Well, thank you.
And that's, I think that I read most of it. Thanks so much again, and can't wait to see you play in person.
Okay. Yeah.
All righty.
All right.
Good luck with
everything.
everything.
The next time I see you.
All right, another one after, longer than 3 hours. 3 hours and 16. Still not longer than Kim's interview. And Kim also wrote, "Good job, Mike. Great stories." Charlie wrote, "Can you try to get more old school psychobilly?" Actually, I will. I'm going to have, I already have a couple guests scheduled. So, but I'm announcing that usually on Facebook. If you're not on Art of Slap Bass email list, please send an email at contact@artofslapbass.com and follow Art of Slap Bass. All the links are below for Instagram and Facebook, Twitter, all of that. Also, Mike's links are below. So if you're interested to follow MIKE BUB, and you should, just check out his links, my links as well. If you like to support Slapstream and the stuff that I do, please check out the Patreon. And there's a couple donation links as well for PayPal and Venmo. And make sure to subscribe. Subscribe button should be somewhere around here, depending where you're and when you're watching this live stream. Thanks again to all of you, and special thanks to Fernando Slap for the slaptastic graphics. So everything, the reason why this looks so cool is Fernando. So thanks, Fernando, again. And don't forget, never fret. Slide it in smooth and keep it in the groove. This is Djordje, your friendly neighborhood bullfiddle cat, and I'll see you next Saturday. Ciao.